All right. Are we live? We in here? Let's see here. Hello, Mirror. Let me get this sent out in case people are wanting to join. Hear me okay? Everything going good? How have you guys been? Let's do this. There we go. I don't know why. I don't know why the title didn't work, but it must have disconnected somewhere along the way. Cool. Well, we'll wait for a second for people to get in here. In the meantime, I'm just going to kind of skim through the Discord since I've been gone for a little bit and see what people have been talking about. Because I know there's been some questions and discussions. Go swap this. Sorry, kind of a quiet start to a stream. Dang, looks like Char and Joe will be gone for some of this. Okay. Let me see. Okay, so let me do something over here. Let's just put in some questions. Let's just throw a new. Let's just do Valanholds Q. Ah, there it is. Okay. I'm just going to put in some of the questions here. Valanhold age. So if you have any other questions that have been popping up, chuck them in the chat. I'll throw them in here and then we can kind of just go through as many as we need to address all of these. Oh yeah. Name. Nomenclature. Is that how you spell that? Nomenclature? Okay. Why does it keep doing that? There we go. Okay. We can chuck in a word count. Word count is a hard line for poems. Okay. Yeah, there you go again. Word count. So we'll touch on that for a minute. Oh yeah. Deadline. '23. Oops. Maps, maybe? I don't know if this is a really big question. Oh yeah, let's talk about winners / what? Chosen. Hmm. Okay. How you guys doing, by the way? Sorry, it's kind of a, it's been a minute since I've said anything, but welcome into the stream. Anyone who's here, glad to have you. Go general lore and see if there's anything here. Um, oh, at the gym, nice. Hope that goes well for you. My understanding the submission feature optimize the standing title until someone ends. Okay, well, let me copy this and check that in there. Oops. Oh, that's, I don't know what just happened there. That's a good question. So we'll go over that a little bit. Looks like you guys have kind of answered some of these questions in the Discord anyways, but we'll go over them since people might be new or might be watching this later. So. Oh, that is a good point. Let's just going to, oh, you guys can't see what I'm doing. That's okay. Let's clarify this. Okay, and let's see what else. Yeah, I just don't want to. I don't want to rehab the same conversations you guys have already had in the Discord. Yeah, so I'm just making sure I'm caught up on everything. Okay. Okay, I think I'm mostly caught up. Was I tagged somewhere? Oh, let's do location questions. Wow, I'm struggling right now. River, fjord, and bay. Okay. Citadel. Okay, I think that's a good amount. Yeah, people have been incredibly active, so it seems the contest is helping keep the hype up. Yeah, I hope so. Looks like we've got 2 responses so far, which no rush, by the way, since we've got plenty of time. Sorry, my camera's a little wonky. We have plenty of time, so no rush. We've still got, what, a week or so? I think at least, right? Where are we at? Yeah, like a week and a half. So more than a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. So no rush on anything if you're behind, if you haven't started yet, if you're just thinking of ideas still, that's great. Don't feel like you have to, rush to get anything done. This stream is kind of as okay, you guys have had a week or two to think about things, to work on things. You're probably running into some amount of roadblocks since this is our first time ever trying something like this. It's my first time trying to orchestrate something like this. I don't know what is and isn't working. So we're all trying this together. So I was wondering what the exact closing date for the submission. So yeah, we'll start with that really quick. Deadline is the 23rd of July. I think it's in the actual thing. Or sorry, not 23rd, 26th of, that is completely wrong. I don't know where I was getting 23rd. 26th. Okay. So yeah, as of right now, the deadline is the 26th. So like midnight on that Sunday, I think, ish. Once again, it's not like super hard. I just don't want people to be mad if they submit 2 days after and we've already kind of decided the winners and whatever. If it's done that day, I think I'm going to hold a live stream that Monday, the 27th, and we'll talk about all of them. We'll read through them together maybe. I mean, I think that'd be a great way to do it. We can highlight some of the cool stuff and we can either vote or we'll figure out how we do the winnings, if it's that day or in a few days, how that'll work. Because I don't think deciding the winners on that live stream is probably the best thing to do. But at least we can go over some of the stuff and talk about the ones that are, leading in a lot of ways or, exemplary or whatever. So, yeah, I think I said the winners will be chosen within the week. That's where you submit. So all this should be in this Google Doc that everyone should have access to. Pretty sure. So let's see here. 12 days. Yeah, 12 days left. And once again, this is our first time trying things. We have probably I don't know, this will either be the most amount of people we ever have working on stuff like this or the least amount. I have no idea how this will go. I don't know. I thought we might have some more people in here, after a YouTube video or some of the TikToks I've been making. I haven't been very consistent with them. So I probably need to pick up some of that and see if we can get some more people in here through that, because I'm sure there's people out there who would love to be a part of this, they just don't know it exists yet. So yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about winners too. So we'll move this. Let's just do that. Winners. What gets chosen? Oh, whoops, here we are. So my original intention, once again, this is a pilot of sorts. We're going to attempt this and see what happens, because we may decide that this doesn't work as well as we thought. We may decide this works better than we thought, and we want to do more stuff like this than we originally thought. I don't really know. This is all an experiment as of right now. There was a minute where I was like, I don't even know if the SpireHelm is worth continuing, and I was like, you know what? Let's give it another shot. Let's try some new things and see if we can make it more fun, more engaging, and better for newcomers and other people. So that being said, my original thought was that one winner would be chosen per Valanhold, per Valanhold. So if there was 4 submissions for the Maw, one of them would win, and that would be the one that gets turned into canon and put into the compendium, stuff like that. Is that the best way to do things? Maybe. I don't know. Part of me, there's 2 sides to this. The first side is, let's do this. Whoops. One winner. I don't know why it's doing that. That seems really weird to me. Ah, keep hitting that. So on the side of, oh wait, this is wrong. There we go. On the side of one winner, I feel like it incentivizes, that's not how you spell that. No. Incentivizes. it incentivizes effort. So it's fun to do things well. It's fun to try to do things to the best of your abilities, to put your best foot forward. And I think the downsides to 2 winners is that, I don't know why it's doing this code thing. No idea. The downside of 2 winners is that people may feel that some of the stuff that they felt was really important to their submission doesn't get recognized. So for example, if you made some really cool stuff with some churches in one of the Valanholds, or you had some storylines that you thought were engaging and would lead to, cool content in your Valanhold, and we end up just kind of taking your visual aesthetic and then mixing it completely with somebody else's submission for their storylines and their other things, and there's some missing link that would bridge the two between your aesthetic and the stories, then you would kind of feel like, well, all of that work I did was for nothing. All they wanted was my cool art, or, whatever it is. But on the other hand, I think the 2 winners, we'd end up with the best possible product, I guess. I don't know if you call it a product, but a lot of times the best way to create something like this creatively is to pick and choose what things support and what things don't support. And so if we had something where 5 people submit for the MAW, and we like certain elements of certain submissions, and we like other parts of other submissions, and we merge them together to get the best possible outcome, that's where I'm like, that's the decision we have to make, is, do we prioritize single effort, or do we allow some stuff to be taken and some stuff to be changed? Does that make people feel diminished? I don't really know. The other hard thing is, too, with the word counts, which we'll go over, is the idea is that we're distilling all of this down very slim. If we start to pull from multiple different things, it could get bloated. So I don't want to end up with a ton of stuff for each, and I don't want to take 2 entire submissions and just merge the stuff that kind of needs to be merged. But then at the same time, there's stuff that could probably fit that you would. So let's go to the 2 winners. If there was 2 winners, one of them gets chosen, or I don't actually know if this makes a difference for 1 winner and 2 winners. If someone gets chosen, yours doesn't, there's probably some stuff and some stories and elements to your ideas for the MAW, for example, that would work even with the other person's submission. So if theirs gets chosen, your stuff could still function. Kind of like how we talked about at the very beginning of the project, the difference between like what needs to be canonized and what can be legend, and what the default is that anything you write can be theoretically canon and could exist in the world. So there's not a huge need for everything to be canonized, but I think you guys deserve, if you're putting in this work, you guys are doing a lot of work to make this stuff. I know it's a fun, like this is a hobby. It shouldn't be like, you shouldn't consider it like a job or anything like that. But it is fun to put in effort and to get something out of it, like your stuff getting canonized, getting put in the thing, whatever. So, right, and then, yeah, we need a way to encourage those who don't win to still keep their material. Because 1 winner per location is obviously collaborative, but yeah, I can see how it becomes discouraging if you never get picked. Right. And so I think the obvious quote-unquote solution to this is, if the 1 winner is a collaborative project, because I know some people are doing these in groups and some people are doing them by themselves. So far, the 2 submissions I've had have been, I think, individuals. And so I haven't looked at them yet. I'm saving that, and I'm letting people, I think I have it where you can edit your submission. So if you submitted it and something happens in this stream, and you're like, oh, I need to go change this, and you go change it and rewrite something, you can resubmit, and it won't, like, you're not locked into your first submission. So if you want to change something, you can. And so because it's a collaborative project, I want the people who don't have the time and the ability to collaborate, say, every day on a Google Doc. I know last stream we talked a little bit about it, and there were some people who were like, I think I'll just, do this myself, and I love some friendly competition. I'll see what you guys do, what you guys come up with. And I think that's just as collaborative as people who are in the same Google Doc, putting ideas forth and then all working together to consolidate. So I don't want to discourage people from doing either of those 2, because I think both are fun. And I think there's a place for both, and both should be allowed. Obviously, it's not like I'm going to ban anything. But obviously, stuff that gets rewarded, behavior that is rewarded, is behavior that is incentivized, and therefore it is the behavior that will keep happening. So if I disincentivize someone from working alone, because the best winners are always the ones who have the most amount of collaborators, then those people are going to feel left out. And if I only, if we pick bits and pieces from both, that might disincentivize people from trying really hard, because they feel like if they make something really, really cool, it might just get thrown out and not appreciated. I don't know. It's hard. It's a fine balance. So yeah, a lot of people seem really happy to collaborate, which is awesome. I'm excited for that, and just excited to see what people come up with, and we'll see what happens there. So as of right now, I'm leaning towards one submission that gets chosen, with the caveat of, if there are some things in other people's submissions that we think are really good, then we could also pull those and put them in as well. And wherever that credit is due in the final, the final PDF or compendium or whatever, we'll make sure that people are getting their credit for what they do. So I guess we're kind of in the middle of these two. I would say we probably have one winner with some bits from other submissions. For example, say so we have a good submission from the Maw, and somebody submits the whole thing, we love it, it's great, and then we have another one that maybe wasn't as impressive in some areas, but has some really good, say their poem was really good, or they have some, I know we talked about in, what did I call it in here? That's probably what I should reference. The fiction writing. Say their submissions for the fiction writing, they have I think I said stories, histories, ledger. If they have a really good journal entry that we think, wow, this would go really, really well with Joe's submission, or whoever, then we could just, we can give them that credit, and we can ask for permission or whatever, and we could say, hey, we really want this in here because we think it supports it really well, even though the rest of your submission didn't get chosen. I don't think that's too mean. I hope people aren't offended by that. I don't really know. Maybe that's not a good idea. You guys let me know. But that's kind of where I'm leaning towards. And then yeah, on top of that, some people might do all four, and then I'd hope if you do all four, you're not hurt if one of yours doesn't get chosen, kind of thing. So we'll see. But that's kind of where I'm leaning towards for now. Does that kind of answer the question? Or are there any other questions about this section? What gets chosen? Winners? Oh, whoops, you guys can't see what I'm seeing. Any other questions about this little bit here? Sorry, this is probably super zoomed out. I feel like it's always so small. I don't mind it when I'm doing stuff on my own, but I feel like for streams, it's probably nice to have a little bit bigger. Let's try this. There we go. Is that too big? It's kind of giant, but yeah, let's go a little smaller. You guys are getting that in there. Whoops. Zoom level, font size. Let's go 20. There we go. That seems probably fine. That way, those of you guys who are watching on phones or something can actually read what I'm doing. Okay. Collabs. Nice. Okay. So we'll cross this off for now. Okay. Let's go to word count. Word count was a question I've seen a bit. And I think this one more comes down to maybe how people are interpreting what I wrote in the actual, what do you call this? The prompt, the document. Oh, if we're doing collabs, can we submit multiple for the same stronghold? What do you mean? Like you're saying there's Jim, Bob, and Joe and Lizard in submission A, and Julie, Jane, Joe, and Lizard in submission B. You're saying if you're part of two different collaborations, could you submit both? Drawing something from someone else's submission, and then I have my own submission. Yeah, I think you could. I don't know if that's the helping someone out for one and have a larger part in another. Yeah, I don't think that's a terrible thing. I think if you're going to be collaborating, you might as well put all of your effort into the collaborative one. And if you're going to be doing it alone, I would say put, more of your effort into your own thing. But I also understand there are some times where the majority of the collaborators will think that one thing is good and you might have an idea for another that might be equally as good. So I don't think there's no official rule, but once again, quality over quantity. If you're dipping your toes in every single one, sure. I mean, there's nothing against it. You'll probably, if your goal is to end up in the compendium, then I guess if you dip your toes in every single one, your likelihood is higher. But I don't think that should be the goal, obviously. And if that is the goal, then I don't think dipping your toes in every single one is the best way to get to that goal. I think the best way to get to it is make sure you make something really, really cool that people will resonate with and that fits the fantasy. So, yeah, I think, yeah, there's no rules against it. Okay, so for word counts, this is one that once again, this is our first time trying something. We're guessing. This is my guesses of what would work best. The reason I came to the word counts that I did was mostly because I want to be able to fit both. I want to be able to fit everything for one Valanhold on 2 pages. And for the compendium, the goal, once again, you can't know whether a design is good or bad unless you know what you're working towards. What we're working towards is a compendium, a distilled version of the world that we can give to people or put out. It's the poster boy of SpireHelm. That's really what it's supposed to be, is if people want to know anything, they should be able to read this in a matter of an hour or less. Ideally you can pitch the whole thing in 20 minutes, but I want people to be able to pick apart this book. And therefore, I don't want an entire chapter per Valanhold. I want a chapter of the Valanholds and each one to have 2 pages. So I'm thinking, you have art on one side with the main description and a poem or flavor text. And on the other side, you have the fiction writing and some other maps and details and other bits of art and whatnot that helps to enhance the flavor and the believability and the character of said location. So that's where these words counts came from. I think I used some other PDFs that I have for like tabletop role-playing games and such that have these word count amounts. And then I also used like my own writings that I had done for this. This right here is, we can find out. Let's see. "98 words. So that being said, if this is 98 words and the poem is 120, so I said, you know what, people might need a little bit more than 100. It might be kind of hard to make a poem like this with exactly this many words. 100 might be just shy. Like if you wanted to do one more verse or one more little element, you might need 30 more words. That's kind of where I ended up at the word counts. And then for the main descriptions and the fiction writing, I kind of just rounded them out to 500 each. Once again, these are approximations. If it's 520, don't stress it. If it's 550, if it's 600, if it's 800, you've probably done a little too much. You might need to cut something out. And I think this will be a good, once again, we'll see. If we get to the submissions and it's like, wow, there is not enough stuff here, we need more stuff, then we can always make more stuff. But I think it's a good practice for us to distill things down. The other part of this is, because it's so collaborative, there will be potentially thousands of submissions at some point in the future. If this project keeps going and keeps growing and everything, we could get to the point where we have a lot of people submitting for each of these. And I want everybody to be able to read everybody's, ideally. That might be a crazy ideal, and we may get to a point where it's impossible. At a minimum, the people who are choosing what's going into the compendium need to be able to read everything. And so I don't want to spend all day, every day, trying to catch up on people's submissions. And so I think slimming it down is good, both for the compendium and for the community to be able to read your guys' stuff. I think the longer winded you get, the less likely people are going to care about your stuff unless it's really, really crazy good. Like if you think about the amount of books out there, how many books have you read of all those books? Like less than, you know, a microscopic percent. So I want the stuff that people read to be either be easy in the sense of like it's fast and it doesn't take forever, or if it's going to be long, it better be really, really good. And that's going to be something that will be harder to regulate. As a project that is community-based and is collaborative, we don't have like a flagship author, you know, writing the lore and the books and the stories and all that stuff like we would for Lord of the Rings or Stormlight Archive or Mistborn or whatever, you know. He didn't write Macbeth. The entirety of One Piece for the poem, kind of too much. Yeah, I mean, you might be able, I mean, if you, I guess if you slim it down to like 0.01 font, then you might be able to fit it on one page. So I guess we could make an exception there. Yeah, if the poem's just a tiny bit over the limit, don't worry about it. Once again, if it's within like 25 words, I mean, 25 words is so small. Like, what is 25 words? Yeah. Like, yeah, if it's within like 25 words or so, don't stress it too much. This is mostly just to keep people from getting too long-winded and, you know, get into exposition that is so drastic that it would take up more space than we have. The other thing too is, if you submit it and it has more, I'm not going to disqualify the submission. What's probably going to happen is stuff will get cut out in the final one. Because if we have to slim it down to a page and you have a ton of words and we don't want to be changing the font size to super, super tiny, then you might have a paragraph or so get cut out. And so either you get to decide what gets cut and what's most important, or someone else might decide for you, probably me, and you might not like that I cut out something that I think is less important than something you would have rather included and cut out something else. So that's probably where I would stand on that. Whoops. So let's put that in here. Word count. There we go. Let's be grammatically correct. Okay. What exactly should we... Okay, I was about to kill someone with how much the poem was tormenting him. Yeah, I saw that. Poor Char. Yeah, if he needs the extra 20 words or so... Oh, whoops, you guys can't see what I'm saying. I thought I remember him saying, like, it's just like 20 words over. Don't stress it. If it fits, it fits. And if it's good, then we'll make it work. Like, that's the thing. If it's really good and it supports the fantasy and it's like, wow, we really need this last line, then we'll make it work. It's just... If I made everything too big, then we're gonna end up with a page of poems that people don't want to read. Really, my inspiration for these poems comes a lot from Mythic Bastionlands, which is a tabletop role-playing game that I haven't actually ever played. I have like the intro book for, but it's a very good. It's honestly the closest thing right now to a SpireHelm TTRPG that I would recommend for what supports the fantasy. I would recommend Mythic Bastionlands first and foremost. But on each page, it has like these little, like these just tiny little poems. It's like one sentence. And I love the flavor and the flow of them. They're open-ended enough that they're not really specific, but they give it a little bit of a vibe and like a feel of like, ooh, there's something there. So I love that. And I think that works really well for this. And so when people flip to the page of your Valanhold, I want them to see something like in-world, a poem or a song that's like, I can taste this a little bit. It's not like it's being told to me out of a Wikipedia page. That's what the description is for. But this little bit is supposed to be just a little something more. And so it doesn't need to be crazy, it doesn't need to be huge or long or anything like that. It's supposed to be very slim. Once again, these are maximum word counts, not minimums, but if it's over by a tiny bit, don't worry about it. Okay. What exactly should be included, if anything, more than physical features for the description? Or are there cultural aspects that should be a part of that? I presumed there would be, but only architecture. Okay, let's talk about that. Word count. I think we're done with word count. I think that's... Are we good on word count? I think that's about it. Let's put this up top. Sure. Descriptions. So yeah, what do you talk about other than architecture? Are you guys allowed to dive into, cultures and stuff like that? Would bar songs work for the poem part? 100%. Yeah, that'd be super cool. Yeah, bar songs, and especially, you know, think a little bit about which hold you're writing for. A bar song at the bay, like a sea shanty. I know we're not doing Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff, but that's something that's like super cool. The fjord, same thing. Like as long as it supports the character, because really what we're trying to go for. And once again, this is our first time trying things. I'm trying to see how clear I could be, because the hardest part of this whole project is communicating what I think this project needs and what the most important fantasies are to you guys, so that we're all on the same page. That's really, really hard to do, especially at the beginning when there's almost nothing made. I haven't made enough art, haven't made enough lore, I haven't made enough story, so it's really hard. But if you think that a bar song would fit best for the maw or the fjord or the bay or the river or whatever, then write that. If you think something else would fit better, then maybe do a poem instead. Or you could, I don't know if I'd really want it split. I think the poem I'd rather have just be one thing. I'd rather it not be split. But in the fiction writing, you could also include a song or a poem or a sea shanty or a bar song. So if you think, I think a poem describes the Valanhold better, but I also love this song I wrote, include it in here. Slim it down if you need to, or do it as the entire fiction writing. So that's up to you guys. I think I was getting long-winded on this. What should we include more than physical features? Okay. So yeah, I think let's go back to here, because I mentioned this, dwarves and different jobs, the people that they would live for. It's okay with that. Yeah. So like main description, I included this, and I think this is probably a shortcoming for mine. We included architectural description, defenses, trade, and etc., which is super, super open-ended. And I think the reason we did this, or that I did this, I don't know, keep saying we. I mean, it is a we. We talk about this stuff on stream. I'm very open to ideas and stuff. I just kind of have to be the final say. That's all. I think the reason we did this was because we don't have a ton of lore built yet. We don't exactly know what all the humanoid races are going to be. We know it's going to be slim. We're not going to have like an expansive, not as many as Dungeons and Dragons, but a traditional old school fantasy amount with maybe one or two other ones that tell you, oh, this is a SpireHelm fantasy, not just generic fantasy. And I think races obviously are very strongly connected to culture, but also so is location, and architecture is connected to culture and stuff like that. And so if you wanted cultural aspects, I think that's a very reasonable thing to put in the main description. The hard part is culture is incredibly complex. A lot of times, world builders, people who are authors and whatnot, will do a lot of juggling of ideas before anything is officially concrete. And they'll throw ideas out, they'll build up little bits at a time, and that will inform lots of different things. We don't really have that luxury. And so if you're trying to fit a full cultural explanation of the Valanhold city or town into 500 words, you may not be able to do that. So I don't want you to feel like you have to include, culture stuff, because it may just be too hard to distill it down enough. But I also think that if we want to look at these as characters in the world, these Valanholds, because they are the most prominent cities. They have the most effect on their surrounding areas and trade and all these different things. And so I think if your Valanhold has enough character, you will see a culture inside of it, and it shouldn't be too hard to include bits and pieces in the 500-word description or in the fiction writing. I think the fiction writing is a great place for cultural things to come forth, because it's much easier to feel what a culture feels like if you were to say, the dwarves here mine all day, and they trudge out to the mines every single day, and then they fight off beasts while they're doing their job, and then they bring back their winnings and go back to the fjord, because I think that's kind of like one of the fantasies that we were talking about. That's cool in a description, but what would be cooler is something that's like, here's the training, whatever, and it's like you are the lead dwarf, or I don't know what you would call it, an overseer of your mining group. And then you have like, okay, these are the two people who are set up as guards, and you have a shift of like, okay, you're on guard duty to defend against whatever, whatever. Please write in here if there was an incident report. That seems very like modern. But you could say today we fought off one dragon, two giants, and Bard was on shift for one, and Burke was on shift for another, whatever it is. And I think that tells you a little bit about the culture of like they really make sure that they have defenses because they're just living in such a giant and beast ridden area. And same with like the bay. If you're talking about pillaging and plundering and thieves that are trying to attack vessels, I feel like you can fit a lot of that into in-world fiction writing, and you might not even need to fit it into the description. Culture and cultural things like that are things that I think you can totally include, and I would totally encourage you to. But I think there are things that are almost better felt than they are said. And so I think the fiction writing would support that really, really well, where you might have a hard time fitting it into the main description. I don't know if that answers your question, or if that's opened a new box of more questions. Let me know, guys. Not just Lizard, but anyone who has a question. For collaboration by taking different parts of people's submissions, it's fine as long as they give permission. I think it's a good idea to keep more people involved making stuff canon. Yeah, I think as long as they give you permission to take an idea of theirs. I mean, there is an amount of like some stuff will get missed in this project. There's too many people collaborating and things that are said in the Discord chats that will never be professionally logged or credited, but we should be trying our absolute best to credit everyone, get permission where it's needed. And if they say, oh yeah, take my idea, don't credit me on it. If this is my only idea is just like a name for some governor or whatever, and they don't want to be credited, sure. If they say, yeah, but make sure I'm a collaborator on the submission, great, either way. We can fit a whole good number of names in small print on the bottom of the pages for the Valanholds, because I do want you guys to get the credit for the work you guys are putting in, because I think that's super cool to be able to see, yeah, this page on this PDF, like that's mine. I made that. So wrote mine from an archivist class perspective, like an overview of the Valanhold for beginner archivists. Does that work, or better to have it more grounded in location? I think that's totally fine. For the description, Lizard, is that what you're saying? I do think this would be really cool. Yeah, the perspective of an archivist or collector of some kind, because the whole compendium, I want to feel like it doesn't quite break the fourth wall. I want it to be like almost breaking the fourth wall in some areas, but mostly grounded in the world. Yeah, I think that's perfect, because I think that also tells you exactly what someone would want to know. I don't know how to explain this. It's as if like you were going to visit France and you wanted somebody to tell you like, what do I need to know about France? You could go to Wikipedia and look it up, but that's going to be so much less meaningful than someone who lives in France telling you like, this is what France is about. This is what, this is what our culture's about. And they might, the first thing that might come out of their mouth is like, yeah, baguettes. And it's like, oh, that's so stereotypical. But they're like, no, it's like, it's a real thing. And, you never know. I just think that Wikipedia will start with, well, France was dedicated had its independence in this year, and they went through these different leaders and revolutions and these different things. And that's less about what France is about and more about how France started. That's a very different type of information. So I think when you write it from the perspective of somebody in the world, or at least if you're thinking about it being written from the perspective of somebody in the world, you're going to end up with something that's very full of character and not just a ledger of dates, locations, times, governors, so on and so forth. Written and teaches a class for year one archivists. This is part of the textbook. Yeah, perfect. Because this is like foundational stuff. If you haven't traveled the realm and you want to become an archivist, you probably need to know this stuff. So yeah, that's a perfect way to do it. What's his score on Rate My Professor? 6 out of 7. Nice. Okay. Where are we at? Yeah, so descriptions. Obviously, I think architecture comes maybe not first. I think the things that are said on here are very important things. And I think that comes back to, what is the fantasy of these places? What are they about? They are first and foremost castles and forts. They are also points of civilization, and the main fantasy is the struggle against darkness. And so when you're thinking about the descriptions, I think the things that are most poignant to that fantasy should be the things that are
on the forefront of your mind. If you have an entire 500-word description and you don't once mention how they defend themselves from the darkness of the realm, then you may as well have written something for a different fantasy world, because one of the core things about SpireHelm is that it's in this darkening realm with constant beast and bale and all these different monsters attacking everywhere. The darkness is growing. And so, with that being said, that's, I think, why we ended up at, well, the most important things are the architecture description, because that informs how it defends itself and how it facilitates trade, because people do still need to survive, and there are some people in surrounding areas. Not, I think the only one that wouldn't have like any towns around it is kind of the river, from what we talked about previously, but even that, you guys can do whatever you want with it. These are kind of guidelines, not necessarily hard canon. I think there was a question about that, or maybe it was somebody's response. They said like, yeah, I feel like it was a little bit too strict, not enough freedom. But so I think culture could probably be thrown in here as well. But once again, this culture should come from the fantasy of these things. It should come from the fantasy of, you know, what is the culture surrounding this castle or fort? How do the people, you know, like you said, a bar song might be perfect. The culture of the bar songs, because they may see bars and drinking as a way to kind of get the darkness and the, you know, nightmares beyond their comprehension away from them for a time. And so there's ways to feed that in. But if it's not clear, you should try again. You should rethink it, or figure out a way, you know, design it so that it supports the fantasy, adds drama, whatever it is. And then yeah, same thing. Like if it's getting into like complex political playgrounds with culture and stuff like that, you might, you know, that's just not one of the things that I think supports what this is about. And that's the hard thing, is like, I want you guys to have freedom and be open, but at a certain point we need to be going in the same direction. Otherwise we're going to end up with a super generic fantasy world. And I've made videos on that and stuff like that. But so yeah, we'll put culture in there. But all of these main descriptions should be supportive of what you feel like is the character of your Valanhold. I think we've talked a little bit about what makes them them. What makes it not just a castle in the realm. Because when you think fantasy castle, you know, it's not, let's see, fantasy castle. Let's see what comes up here. Yeah, like this can only tell you so much. There is some cool stuff happening here at a glance. It's an interesting structure. I hope this isn't AI, but I'm starting to think it might be. Who knows? Let's say it is an AI. We know this one's not AI. This one has a lot of character, though. I mean, you got a statue here. You got some waterfalls. You got a ship at the bottom. And you have a very towering structure, mountains behind, dragons around. So this tells you a little bit about, you know, maybe not the culture, but the character. There's a living, breathing thing here. And you can infer, even if it's not explicitly stated, you can infer. They have characters of favor. Sorry if the siren's going by. They have people they look up to, or something in the past did. It looks like it might be ruined over here. I don't know. This is not dead. There is people here. You can tell the surrounding area is lush. The dragons above may be an indication of danger. This is a defense against it, or they may be guarding it. There's something to feel here. There's something to see, like, there's an amount of character here. And it's hard sometimes to just see that from a picture. My job later is to take your guys' characters that you've built and written and visually communicate that, visually affirm, or I don't know if communicate's the right word. Maybe communicate, I don't know. To reinforce, that's the word I'm looking for. To visually reinforce the fantasies that you guys have written. And so for this, for example, it's really hard just architecturally to say what the character is, but there is a distinct difference between this type of architecture and, say, this type of architecture. And immediately, these two castles, even though they're both castles, have distinct character and have very different vibes and could be written about very differently. Imagine that, like, this color plays a huge part, light, shadow, all these different things. This is much more romantic than something much more gothic or, you know, industrial like this one. So when you're writing, think about what kind of character you want to write. Because like we've said, this is all going to inform our later stuff. Because once we have these built, we're then going to probably go to the Sanctiarchs next, or the lords and ladies of the rulers. But Then we go to the Sanctiarchs, and each of the Sanctiarchs are actual characters, humanoid characters, not just locational characters, and they will each have their own nuances, passions, pitfalls, different things like that. And so those we want to then write backwards and say, okay, if this is what the city is, and this is the character of the city, what would the person who originally founded this city be like? And how can we see some of the visual design language and the textural and the cultural and all of these different things come out of the city and into this physical character that we see? It's similar to, like, I guess you'd say, like Star Wars. The rebels have a certain character, and all of their costumes and their visuals and the way they behave flows out of that. And then the Empire is very industrial and very sleek. Darth Vader is reflective. All the floors are reflective, and you see little motifs between the two that are like, I can tell these things are connected, even though it's never explicitly stated that Darth Vader was the interior designer of the Death Star, because he wasn't. And so we'll kind of be working backwards from that. So these are the most important things, and maybe that's a bad thing to start with, but I think it's a great place to start, because these will serve as the main locations for people who are writing. Whenever anybody is writing about anything in the realm, they are probably going to reference at least one of these places. Because if you are in the realm, you are either between two of these places, or around about one, or within one. Like that's kind of your options, because everything else is inevitable death. Like if you're outside of the Valanholds for too long, you will probably die. And so this will give tons of context to the entire world. And so we want these to be full of character and not just, it's just a castle, it's just a city, they're all kind of the same. So that was a long-winded explanation for what to include in the description, but culture is definitely one. You could definitely put culture into the fiction writing as well. I think it's probably even better there. But you could touch on it. You could say the culture of these people is, for example, the fjords, these are going to be, or I guess the river. The culture of the river is deeply religious and also deeply, what's the word, hard-skinned or tough, like, relentless. I don't know. You could mention the cultures, but that can only serve you so far when you mention it. It'd be much better to say, here's a prayer, here is a purity seal that the knights wear at the river that tells you a little bit about the river itself and how they view themselves in relation to it. And that's real culture, I think, compared to just, these people are culturally chill and very happy and they smoke a lot or something like that. I don't know. There's only so much you can do in exposition. Welcome in, Moth. All right, let's see what else we got. So let's just delete that. Anything that serves reinforces character of your hold. I think that's probably the best way to do it. That's a really long way to say that, but if you ever want to go back and watch this stream and hear me say it all again, you can. So they're pretty chill, happy, and they smoke a lot. Yeah, I don't know if that's even a place. I'm trying to think of a place on the map that would be like that. I don't know if there is a place where they're, I mean, maybe somewhere, honestly, probably, if I had to guess, I'd say somewhere on the like the west side or the east side of the lake at the base of SpireHelm is probably the most chill place you could possibly be. Or on the mountain somewhere, because you're safe within the bulwarks, the walls, and everything like that. You're not out in the wild, the wildlands. That's probably your best bet. That's probably the only place where they're pretty chill and smoke a lot. Everywhere else is probably not super chill and smoke a lot. But if you're writing about the hobbits, that's what you would write about. That's what they do. The Dark One. Oh, will we do the Dark One's army ever? Yes, I fully intend to, and I think that will be a big collaborative part. As of right now, my thoughts on it are that it will be, obviously the main point, the main headquarters is beyond the Titans in the lands of exile or whatever, and then the Lost Valanhold serves as kind of this, I don't really want it to be a copy of Isengard from Lord of the Rings, but there is an element of that where it was once a good tower and is now serves as an evil. It's a common trope. I'm sure maybe Tolkien was the first to do it, but it's a lost city that is mourned by the people, but also from the enemy they see it as their their furthest stretch into the land. And so I imagine they'll have armies either coming from the Titans to there and then out in the lands, or they'll use that as some sort of building place. We don't really know yet, but we'll get there eventually. So yeah, we'll talk about the Dark One and his armies at a future date. Right, the Dark One's actually super chill. He's just smoking and hanging out in the lands of flame and fire, I guess, or who knows what's back there. Valanhold Age. Let's cover this one really quick. This is the timeline that we had previously. I don't know why everything keeps changing font sizes and doesn't fit. I don't know. I feel like I always have to readjust the size of all of these boxes. It drives me bonkers because I love having them nice and pretty. So, Foundation of SpireHelm, hundreds of years, Aletheus is crowned king. And so, I think in this time, there is, so this is going to be, once again, a little tangent. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. We talk about, is it in here? Yeah, I found it. Here we go. So the fantasies. This is the master lore document. What are the fantasies of this world? Good versus evil. Order versus chaos. Valiance will save the realm. Old school. Soft magic. Not a lot of exposition. Here we go. Mysterious. Travel is treacherous. Magic is unpredictable. The realm is changing. Here are some other ones. Prominent fantasies that one would hope to find in SpireHelm. Exploring ruins is a big one. Fighting monsters of horror. Encountering mystical beings. Making offerings for the favor of the gods. So we talk about that. And if there's only 4 castles in the entire realm, we're going to end up with a pretty boring story. My thought is, for those exploring mysterious ruins and dungeons and all these different things, these could be from times past in the realm, and for hundreds of years, there was wars happening in the realm with other kingdoms, there was warring kingdoms, and there was castles and other places. So there were other things that have now been kind of ruined or overtaken or changed or whatever. So that fluctuates like maybe it would in medieval history somewhat. Maybe they didn't get as ruined. Probably takes a lot of effort to do stuff, but it's a magical world. So maybe they were ruined and sometimes they get uncovered and rebuilt or otherwise. Some dungeons would probably be lost for long times. And then -20, Aletheus is crowned king. At that point, I think King Ferilion is the first one. He banded together all the 5 fiefdoms, towns, and mercenaries and whatever, and kind of made the kingdom of SpireHelm. Then hundreds of years pass, still wars, so there could be kingdoms and castles and whatever, forts, all these different things. Then at year 0, the fighting stops with other kingdoms. And then after another 10 years or so, magic starts coming back, darkness starts coming back, and that's where our story picks up. At that point, the Grand Archivist is ordained, the foundation of the archive happens, and the Sanctiarchs are ordained. So, and they are given the task of defending the realm. And because of that, they then are given the Valanholds. Because at the beginning, it's little bits of darkness. And as it grows and grows and grows, things get more and more dangerous. And at certain points, entire villages are getting wiped out, then entire towns, and then entire cities, until there's only really the 4 or 5 or 6 left between the 5 Valanholds before the one was lost and the capital. And so with the Valanholds age, they are kind of, in a way, no older than the foundation of, that's the year 100, sorry, not 10. They're no older than, I guess, from Aletheus's vanishment. You're talking about from where we are, they're no more than like 50 years old-ish. Once again, this number could be changed, whatever. Now, did they take existing structures and turn them into the Valanholds? Maybe. Did they pick spots that were already fairly populated? Maybe as well. But these were kind of Aletheus's designation. I don't know if that's the right word. He delegated that to the Sanctiarchs to say, you need to have an outpost. We'll fund the thing. We'll build it for you, and this will serve as your beacon, your home point, your whatever. And then that was probably around 100, right around the time the Sanctiarchs are ordained. He says, you are my knights. I give you the land. I give you your keeps, your Valanholds, and they will never fall, and they will stand forever, whatever, valiant and strong, whatever. And then the darkness gets so bad everywhere else and keeps growing, keeps wiping out cities, that people decide to become refugees and gather around these points of strength. And over those 50 years or so, they change from just being a, an outpost for a night, have now converted into full-blown towns that are the biggest in the realm, almost cities, basically. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but I would say no more than 50 years old. But they could have used other stuff. So if you feel like, once again, these are characters we're creating. They are Valanholds, but they are characters. So if you feel like, man, I really feel like this place would serve better if it has some old culture to it, and the Valanhold now serves as something else, but it's built upon the foundation of an older culture, put that in there. Do it. If you think that's better, send it. If you think it makes more sense for it to be more than 50 years old, that's fine. It just hasn't been called a Valanhold for more than 50 years because it wasn't called a Valanhold until the Sanctiarchs called it such, basically. And because they were given, divine authority from the throne, people respect that and see that as, okay, this was once the city of blank. It is now the Valanhold. And maybe they keep the same name. We need to go over names in a second. But there's nothing wrong with that. So 1 billion people for each Valanhold. Yeah, not quite. I know rough guidelines were given, but it seems a bit small. Yeah. Where did we get to? Oh yeah, here we go. Population. So let's just talk about this for a second. This is a crude map for locations. These are not my images. Oh, whoops, you guys can't see this. There we go. This is a crude map. These are not my images. These are inspiration points. And so there are some things that I am more firm on, and there are some things that I am much less firm on. There is no, I haven't labeled everything like, this is red for I'm like extremely particular about, and this is green for I really don't care. If it's in here, if it's in words, then it's probably somewhat important. But some of the stuff is less important than others. For example, how this picture looks. Does it really matter if it ends looking like that? No. I hope it looks a lot different because I hope that we have our own distinct visual language and whatever. One of those things, some of the things that I think are more important are what it's not. If I ever say I don't think it's this, that's probably pretty important because I think these are the easy things to fall into, which is like swashbuckling Jack Sparrow pirates. We don't want to be that. We don't want to be How to Train Your Dragon in Vikings. We don't want to be Venice. We don't want it to be, obviously stonework wouldn't work on a lake. It's not that kind of fantasy, whatever. However, things like population, these are more guidelines, architecture, across 2 to 3 giant rocks in the bay. This is like hey, you should think about this because I think this would make something pretty cool. If you think, no, I'm just going to go from the 2 edges of the bay all the way across the middle with no supports underneath, cool. That's like, this is all, and maybe I didn't make that clear enough. This is like an inspiration point. If you think something else serves your character better, because what I wrote here is kind of like what my default, we kind of invented these locations and we said, what is the most likely point of these locations? What makes the most sense? What fits the fantasy the best? And this is kind of what I spit out in, not too long. I didn't spend forever on this because I didn't want to take your guys' fun. And so with that being said, this is kind of what I picture immediately. Across 2 or 3 rocks, we think lighthouses is big, seafaring vessels, corsair, privateers, wall-mounted harpoons, nets, traps, that sort of stuff. If you're writing something like this and you're thinking, I think I have an idea of what this character would be, and I have this story and this vision, this fantasy that I think other people resonate with, then do that instead. Don't be too stuck on anything in here. And I think population is one of those. This is a general guide. I think like the smallest one is the fjord. 7,500 or so with 1,000 outside the walls. I think that's pretty much the smallest. The bay has 8,500. The Maw, I think, is the biggest with 10,000. So like you're talking about 15,000-ish people, which it seems a little small. These are kind of like, I did some research into historical medieval cities and stuff like that. So I want it to be grounded, but not, once again, it's a fantasy, so who really cares? But I think scale does matter when it feels like what type of city is this? And when it gets too many people, then it starts feeling more like a city or a mega city, a metropolis, instead of a town. And the hard part is as well, people are flowing in from all over the land, and so the population is probably only increasing, but also fluctuating. People are dying, people go out to try to defend and they die, and people don't make it on the way. And the local settlements, this can look like anything you want. If for the Maw, for example, we talked a little bit about, this area, you can't really see it, to the east along the river of the Maw that goes towards SpireHelm. We talked about that being very fertile and being like great farmland, and that's like where like the main farms are in the realm, other than the ones that are within the walls of SpireHelm that support, the main city as much as they can. If you think, I want to make that bigger, I want to expand it out, and I want the Maw to be the least walled of all the cities, and I want it to be, they try to protect everyone around them even more than the other cities do. If you think that works, do it. And yeah, if for you that number bumps up to 10,000 outside the walls and 10,000 inside the walls, that's probably fine. I think as long as you're not getting above like 30 to 50,000 people total, and once again, we shouldn't really be digging into the numbers. It's more about the character, the vibe, the story. When it comes to lore, something that I've been thinking about a lot is where are we going to start drawing the story? And I think the compendium kind of needs to be done first. But at a certain point, we need to have something that people care about. And the story is more important. We never once, when they go to Coruscant in Star Wars, we never ask how many people live here. We never ask how many buildings or offices there are in the Senate building. What we see is the story, what is necessary for communication of the vibe and the character of the world. And so you go into the Senate building and you can see the giant rotunda, and you see a few offices, and you don't really have to get a full sense of scale or you don't have to have the numbers for how many Jedi are there in the Jedi Temple. We don't even know. We have no idea. I'm sure I could Google it right now and figure it out in a couple clicks. But that's not relevant to the story. What we do know is the Jedi Temple is massive. There are more than 1,000 Jedi at the Jedi Temple, and probably less than 1 million. And that's a huge gap. And so really what we're trying to communicate is what is essential for the character of the world, the story, the fantasy, etc. Is it a giant sprawling metropolis for the Maw, for example? No. Is it a growing town of people who are constantly building out onto this lake and it's getting bigger and bigger? Yes. And so I wouldn't get too caught up in the populations to begin with. But if you do feel like, I feel like this is just a little small, don't worry about it. Go up, whatever you need to support the fantasy. If you're saying like, oh yeah, we had this famine or this monster come through off the lake and it wiped out a huge chunk of the village and we lost 1,000 people, and therefore we need you need to bump this number up to 30 because now you're at 29,000 or something. Perfect. Doesn't matter. Those sort of minute details and stuff can be there if we need them to be, but if we don't need them to be, don't worry about it too much. So hopefully that kind of answers your question. Yeah. If SpireHelm is equivalent to medieval Constantinople, every Valanhold should be Istanbul. I think that might be a little too modern. Let's see. Constantinople was established in 330 CE. Okay, so maybe that's actually more. I mean, I know Constantinople went through a lot of different hands and changed a lot over the years. Yeah, because I think we were talking about like, I don't remember if we gave a hard point for, do we say like 4th to 11th century? I don't really know. Once again, it's fantasy. It's not medievalism. It's not perfectly medieval, so don't worry about it too much. Let's see. In relation to the fjord, I'm still partial to Norse inspiration as dwarves. Things usually are. But you say Viking, no Vikings. Yeah. So like, what we don't want, really, what I'm trying to think of the best way to communicate this. Once again, the hardest thing for me is communicating my ideas and my vision well. And it shouldn't just be my vision, but we do need a vision that we're going for. Otherwise, we'll end up in who knows where. when you look at every good world, every good sci-fi, fantasy, or whatever, has a unique character and a vibe to it. And there are elements of story, lore, location, history, all of these things that feed into what is the experience about. This is kind of what I've tried to communicate in the fantasy videos. It's a really hard thing to communicate. It's more something that's felt. What I don't want is a fantasy world like D&D. And I have no ill feelings with D&D, even though I do think it's one of the worst tabletop RPGs. Maybe not the worst. I think it's overhyped, but that's beside the point. I think it's very good. It's very good, and it is the foundation of tabletop role-playing games. But what D&D aims for is to be the first part of the funnel for people who have never played any game ever. The first one they're going to play is D&D because it's the easiest to get into, has the most amount of resources, and one of the things is like when your friend pitches you on D&D, what they say is you can do anything. You can do anything. You want to be a pirate, you want to be a rogue, you want to be an elf, you want to be a ranger, you want to be whatever, you can be anything in D&D. And so what you end up with in D&D is if you want to have gothic horror like Castlevania, you have a section of this that can be that. If you want part of it that is swashbuckling pirates, you can have that. If you want mega fantasy airships and all these high fantasy stuff like Vox Machina and Critical Role, you have that. That's a section of this D&D world that you can play in. And I think that serves very, very well for Dungeons and Dragons. The difference is we are not making an open tabletop role-playing game, and we are not trying to appeal to every single fantasy audience. We've narrowed in, we've niched down, as some might say, to retro, old school, dark fantasy. And so things like swashbuckling pirates seem out of place for this type of world. Things like Vikings and How to Train Your Dragon seems, even though they kind of corroborate in the same time period, I mean Vikings and dragons are different, obviously, but like even though these cultures, these fantasies, these medievalisms take place in the same time, they are inherently different tones, different fantasies, different experiences in the world. And so if we start bleeding into Game of Thrones politics, or if we start bleeding into Warhammer when it comes to Grimdark, if we start bleeding into Legend of Zelda when it comes to high fantasy and these floating structures and all these different things and fairies and whatnot, we end up kind of losing what makes SpireHelm. And since we're in the stage of figuring that out still, we don't really have a unique, super solid character yet. It's really important that we know at least what to avoid. Even if we don't know really what we are yet, we know what we're not. So that being said, what we don't want is, I bet if I search Vikings, it's going to come up with the most Hollywood stuff of all time. Oh, actually, it's not terrible. But I mean, I love the Spangle Helm as much as the next guy. And I think there's a place in SpireHelm for the Spangle Helm. I love the helmet. I think it's one of the best in all of medieval history, whatever. But it does get to a point, this right here. This is Hollywood fantasy, or Hollywood Vikings. And this, in my opinion, is a little too far outside of the realm of dark fantasy and retro dark fantasy. This feels more like modern Hollywood, the high fade, the braids, the pelt, like just the vibe, the feel. I don't know, it's crisp, it's clean, it's whatever. That doesn't mean that we can't use axes. It doesn't mean that we can't use fjords. It doesn't mean that we can't use pelts. It doesn't mean that we can't use Viking ships. All these different things can be drawn upon. What we don't want people to do is to come into SpireHelm thinking it's a dark fantasy world and then find out that an entire fourth of the entire world is basically just Hollywood Vikings all over again. I don't think that's super, super fun. I bet I could find a picture. Let's see. That's not going to do it because that's mine. Rosetta Giants. Whoops. If I can spell. Where are we at? Where is it? Here we go. This piece of work, though, this somehow feels different than those Hollywood, Vikings. Do they still have the Viking helmets? Are they still using axes? Are they still wearing animal pelts? Are they still in snow and whatnot? Yes, but there's a different feel to it, if that makes sense. So when you're trying to draw on cultures and what things are and what they're not, it's not necessarily, once again, it's not a super hard rule. It's just we don't want this to become we don't want the Bay to become Pirates of the Caribbean land. And then if you want Fantasy Land, you go to SpireHelm. And then if you want How to Train Your Dragon Land, you go to the Fjord. And if you want Politics Land, you want Venice Land or whatever, you go there. And if you want, what is this one not? Do we not have a, oh wow, we don't even have a, what it's not section for the river. If you want Crusade Land, you go to the river. We don't want the river to become the Zealot Crusade, Crusader. Even if it's close, even if it's the closest thing in the world to Crusaders, even if the Maw is the closest thing we have to, Thieves Guild politics, even if the Fjords is the closest thing we have to How to Train Your Dragon and Vikings, and even if the Bay is the closest thing we have to pirates, we don't want it to become Pirate Land, Fantasy Land, Viking Land, etc. Does that kind of make sense? Let's see. Whole realm is just like English, no matter how north you go. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Like, yeah, it's one realm, it's a small area, so it's not like a monoculture, but it's not completely different worlds. We'll get to the other parts of this world at a much later date. If this goes as big as we want it to, we'll do some overseas stuff, we'll do some other continents, we'll do bigger lands, we'll expand. But I want this to feel like an old school fantasy realm for now. So much of Dwarven identifying fantasy, Norse inspired. Yeah, I think if you abandon the Norse inspiration for dwarves entirely, then yeah, you do lose what makes a dwarf. And because Tolkien and others in fantasy have drawn so much upon, that the visual aesthetic, the angular edges and the helmets and the rugged feel, the long beards, the pelts, I think if you move too far away from that, you lose it. So a lot of it's going to come down to nuanced designs and how you communicate that. But if you're not careful, you may end up slipping into the Viking fantasy. So we didn't consider is 100,000 mole people underground. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. There's probably an entire world underground. Too bad we'll probably not touch on that for a few years. Aren't many dwarves to begin with. The culture of the fjord should not be based on this identity. That's also a good point. We did talk about how if it's people that are other than humans, they are kind of like the remnants of a past age, and so, or they're coming in from other lands that are beyond the scope of what people understand as the world. And so they're seen as kind of these, not other people, they mingle, they're not seen as like outsiders entirely, but they're not the foundation of the culture in some of those areas. Cam, I was joking. Let's see. They are best community, but they're 40% of the hold at best. Yeah, could be. Fjord is very dwarven, not quite 50-50, but maybe 40-60, 30-70. Yeah, once again, we don't have to get entirely into exactly the percentage. I think if you're putting the percentage into your submission, you're probably losing the plot a little bit. But you could also make it clear that there is a good high presence of dwarves in there, or whatever it is, Sprinkles, the hold would not be the Vikings hold. Yeah, it should have some sprinkles. It's in a fjord, it's in the north. Like it functionally, it takes place where the Vikings took place, maybe, but it doesn't necessarily have to be all Viking, because we are still in a fantasy world and things happen differently in this world than they did in real life. But you might end up arriving at a similar destination of like, oh, well, they have the same land as the Vikings, and so they use wolf pelts as coverings because they live in a snow area where there's lots of wolves and other giant beasts like bears and other giants. So yeah, they're going to end up with the same stuff because that's where this takes place. That's completely different than I'm going to design this SpireHelm place to be exactly like my favorite fantasy Viking show or book or series or whatever, That's a little bit different. Most dungeon crawler region is the river. Yeah, probably the river and the fjord, I would think, are the two that are most dungeon crawling. The fjord, because it's like my fantasy that I originally thought was it's like built into the cliffs, and you have these like sprawling, almost like an ant hill, but like within the rock of the fjords and stuff. So there'd be lots of underground, because if it's in a snowy region, you're going to end up with this like a few seasons of you have to be underground and survive and only come out when you can. And then yeah, the river is like this land of just completely, emaciated and destroyed dungeons and castles and forts and things that have been attempted to be built and couldn't be, and then overgrown and then taken over. And so you'd have all these like dungeon pits and all the dark forces of the realm that are trying to attack. And so if you were a person going out to find loot and
or save someone, like yeah, that's your dungeon crawler section. So I completely agree, Moth. That's definitely it. From a name POV, I think the names like Bjorn, Eric, I think of the classic dwarven style buildings, which are Norse inspired. Yep, 100%. Not completely Viking. Exactly. Berserk, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, good example of dark fantasy. 100%. SpireHelm is peak. And yeah, you look at something like Elden Ring, and there's differences in design. And honestly, Elden Ring is one of my biggest inspirations for anything ever. I think the project as a whole is beautiful. I understand people's gripes with it. It's a ridiculously hard game. I got carried through my whole playthrough. I have not beat it by myself. And there are some elements of the lore and the world building that are kind of like, oh, all I'm doing is reading item descriptions. I agree. However, I think the visual design language of Elden Ring is beautiful and works very, very well to reinforce ideas that at a first glance you go, this looks believable, this looks like fantasy. And at a 10th or 100th or 200th glance, you go, wait a minute, there might be something here that I didn't see originally. And then it takes a second, you go, oh my gosh, this place has the same architecture as this place. And then you draw the connection between the two and you go, oh my gosh, this statue here is connected to this statue here. And then you learn about a character and you go, oh my gosh, this character is the connection point between this location and this location. And that is what adds a second layer of story to the world. Or at the beginning, you're seeing the story as this, this experience that you have. And then on a second playthrough or a lore video or whatever it is, or just messing around in the game, you go, oh my gosh, there's more to this. And that reinforces the story that you already had in your brain or changes your perspective on it. And you might go, oh my gosh, this isn't what I thought it was. And now I've experienced a completely new story, even though nothing has changed. Everything's been there the whole time. It's just my view and my outlook is different. And that's beautiful design. And a lot of that comes from their visuals and their story, but they also thought through it all. So it's really impressive. And I hope we can do something as cool as that. It'll take a lot of work though. And none of us are professionals. So who knows where this will go. Let's see. High Fade Braid is atrocious. Not a fan. Petition to rename SpireHelm to SpangelHelm. Interesting. SpireHelm. Okay. What if we all just plagiarize our whole world from Tolkien? We can get our writings done so much quicker. Genius. With this concern, there needs to be an anchor base to our world around, but we don't have that yet. I thought these next few events is to build that anchor. Yeah, Joe, I think that's probably the most important thing. And that's why we're starting with the strongholds and not necessarily the cultures or the races or the people, because we need to build a really good foundation of what makes SpireHelm and not just any other generic fantasy world or Lord of the Rings land or pirate land or Viking land. And so I want people to be able to come to SpireHelm and say, you guys have a snowy region with dragons, with giants, with, pelted animals and, these cave structures. Why? What makes this SpireHelm and not just dwarves from Lord of the Rings or Vikings? And they see it and they go, that's a really unique take on, snowy regions, and that's a really unique take on pirates. And this, when they see that, they go, this is a SpireHelm pirate, not a swashbuckling Jack Sparrow pirate. So yeah, we'll be building that anchor. I think that's the most important thing is when you're building this. You don't have to be too unique. You don't have to come up with something completely alien to anyone. Whoops. But at the same time, there is we do want something that has its own distinct character. And I think we're doing a great job so far. Yeah, we just gotta keep up with it. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick break for a second to go to the bathroom and fill up my water bottle, and then I will be back. So let me know if there's any other questions. I'll put this up for now so that you can see what we've kind of talked about, and if this prompts any other questions, I will be right back. I'm going to say convergent evolution writing. Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. Pirates, but they're all aliens. Vikings, but they're all aliens. Politicians, but they're all aliens. Okay, but that one's real. It's not fun. Just a theory, a GA theory, a GAME theory. Cool. Let's go over some of these other questions really quick. I'm back, right? Yeah, you guys can hear me? Okay. Names. Let's go over names really quick. I think this was an oversight on my part. A lot of this has been an oversight on my part. Like I said before, communicating things clearly is really, really difficult. Every time you think this could not be more clear and everybody will understand what I'm thinking, nobody understands it. The names. Here we go. So I think I might just delete this entirely. I don't think we need this line at all. With reference to its location, I think we just put that here. I think we just say the maw the river, etc. And then we don't even need this at all. I think we just get rid of this. Got it. Yeah, I think we just get rid of that. So, oh yeah, we talked about convergent evolution. So I think, so here's what I was thinking. I didn't communicate this very well. I think I had this originally, that line that I had here was originally up here somewhere, and then I put it down here when because it started off as notes, and then you format it and everything. I don't think we need this. My intention was, if you don't think the name, the maw, the river, the fjord, the bay, etc., if you don't think that needs to be said, we don't have to call it that. I intend for these names, the cities, to be called by their names, not by the names that I gave them. Those were entirely placeholder names. I probably should have made that more clear, but those were basically placeholder names and they were not meant to be official what people refer to. Because also, the thing is, the name the river could be said about all of them. The bay is at the end of a river. The maw is at the end or the beginning of a river. The river is along a river, or at least close to one, but not necessarily on it. And the fjord is on a river at the end of a fjord, And so, in a way, the names the river and the maw and the fjord and the bay, like the maw has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that it's located in what the people call the maw. So, like, I had no intention of people sticking with those names. If at a certain point we say people submitted already, they don't want to change their thing, they don't want to think of a name, then people don't have to change it. We could come up with a new name or whatever. But yeah, when it comes to names, I intend for you guys to come up with what you think fits best. If that's something like, Minas Tirith or Lord of the Rings. Those are like a lot of the cool names I know from fantasy, and I'm trying to think of other cool names. Baldur's Gate is a big one. Isn't that a location in D&D? I'm pretty sure. So you've got all these things you could call it. And maybe the maw makes more sense for the bay. If you think that the name, the abyss or whatever, it could be anything. Whatever you guys think, that's what the names should be. So I might just need to put in here. Whoa. I don't know. I don't know exactly the best way to phrase this, but that probably wasn't nearly clear enough at the get-go. Do we write the Sanctiarchs? Eventually. That'll probably be the next Realm event. If this one goes well, we'll probably do the Lords next and the Sanctiarchs next. Maybe not in that order, but yeah. Yeah, not in the Valanholds stuff. I don't intend, because you might think, well, wouldn't the Valanhold be incomplete without it? Yeah, I think once we're done and we're like actually making the compendium, we'll include some of the stuff about the Sanctiarchs in the Valanhold section because we'll need it. It'll be prevalent to that point, but right now, I don't think we need it necessarily. If you have some ideas for it, write them somewhere. Definitely write them somewhere. If you have an idea like, I think one of the Sanctiarchs would be kind of like this, go ahead and write it somewhere. Don't necessarily include it in your submission, but if your submission gets chosen, or if it doesn't, that idea for the Sanctiarch and their relation to this could still be used if you collaborate with someone else, if you end up writing your own. Don't throw any good ideas out the window yet. You know, we can have a giant stack of good ideas that we just can pull from at any point. So, Callahan DeLevy, yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that name. So yeah, this was probably not made clear enough, but yeah, I don't know. Any other questions about names? I think that's about it. And if you guys don't have a good name for it and you're stressing about a name, you can just put in the maw or the river or whatever. You can call it whatever you want. We could have a stream. We could do, we could put it out to the community into the Discord or polls or whatever, and we could make some cool names for the locations. Don't feel like you have to necessarily. I just want to give you guys that power, because once again, if you make this, like we talk about, Farum Azula in Elden Ring and the Farum Great Bridge, and you want these connections of story to take place, if you put in that work and you think the name is important, then put in the name. If you think, oh well, my creativity and the things that I value and that I put into this story don't have to necessarily do with a naming scheme, then that's totally okay as well. And we can come up with something cool for you. We might even be able to come up with it, with other people and connect it. So I don't want you to have to stress about it. Do whatever you think is the best. But I don't want to discount people for their cool ideas and what they make. That's really it. Yeah, so this is a good question. How do we prevent them from getting too different? That's a really hard one, because we've pulled from, I think this is a hard one for a lot of different reasons. One, traditional fantasy. I mean, if we go to the grandfather of fantasy is Tolkien. He was a linguist at his core. I think he taught ancient language studies or translations or something at Oxford. And so he invented languages to come up with naming schemes that fit. We don't have that. I am not that, and I don't think any amount of collaboration will bring us to that solution without a ton of work and a lot of people following very particular rules and having to keep up with this, this rule system that we come up with. So I don't think that we can have an official, like, this is how you name stuff in SpireHelm, because I don't think we'd be able to be robust enough to come up with enough unique names that things don't start sounding way too similar. I'm not throwing any shade at Tolkien, but like Saruman, Sauron, Arwen, Eowyn, we've got all these names that are very similar because of that naming scheme. Imagine that, except you have 1,000 people working on the same project. They're going to inevitably overlap to the point where it's like, it's going to be impossible to figure out what somebody's referring to. You're going to end up with, isn't that the same as this name, as this name, as this name? So I don't want that.
On the other hand, we've pulled from, in history, we're pulling from bits of reality when you make fantasy. A lot of it comes from the Middle Ages, which is kind of where we're centered, because that's where a lot of the old school fantasy, the retro fantasy, inspired fantasy, that's where that comes from. And so we've pulled from Latin, we've pulled from Old English, and we pulled from like Germanic languages so far. Some of them more than others. We have names like, in the Grand Archive, we have names that are much more Latin sounding, because the nature of the archive is more Catholic and like religious and like solemn, and so it makes sense to have names like Libris Electi and the Tutus Tenebris and Collector Scriptorum, these like Latin type names. On the flip side, we have names like the Woldlands, which are extremely Old English and like slightly Germanic. And English is a mix of Latin and I think it's Germanic. English is English Germanic. Yeah, okay. So English is a Germanic and Latin language. So it's a mix of two, which makes our job hard as well, because we don't have something as solid as something like Latin or French or Spanish, where it's all Latin based with very few Germanic words. That being said, I don't know where I'm going with this, actually. It's hard. It's going to be difficult to keep the names from sounding too different, or for not fitting the world. However, I don't even know how to say this. I think the naming schemes can come from, but then we have to come up with the rules. I was going to say, like, things like the Valanholds would be named by their sanctiarchs, which are the king's knights, and therefore they would be of the kingdom. And so if the kingdom has a naming scheme, or at least a style of language, then we would assume the things in the realm would follow that language scheme. But even that gets complicated, and then we'd have to have rules, and I don't know how easy that is to pull off. I feel like that's going to just make it more frustrating and complicated for people. And so that's why, so far, it's kind of been, there is no real rules. Does it sound fantastical? Yeah. And then I think about, okay, we have old fantasy, like retro-inspired dark fantasy, this type of stuff. We have the Death Dealer. We have Conan the Barbarian. Samaria. Trying to think if there's any other. Sirens of the North Sea. That's a bit different. I'm looking at these, retro vintage books from the 80s and 90s. Looking at, I don't know if this one's extensive. Yeah, let's see here. What does this say? Can't even read half of this, which is sick. I love that, but it is kind of hard. Patrolot, maybe? I don't even know. So like I've been taking a lot of inspiration from different things. Avalon to Camelot. These are very medievalism type of words, even if they've been translated over the years to mean different things than what they originally were made of. Anstelung, Bremen. Like you can kind of just let in advance. I don't know. This is like, is this French? I don't know. And so, and the other thing too is the Middle Ages took place all over Europe. What we consider medievalisms took place a lot of times around Europe, even though there were other things happening around the world. What fantasy is based off of a lot of times is, European medievalisms. And so you have things all the way from French to German to Dutch to English, Irish, Norse. Like you get all this huge, broad range of different things, which makes it really, really difficult to pin down, well, what is ours going to be? Because it's pretty easy if you were just to say, okay, we're only doing French fantasy, or French medievalism, then it's pretty easy to know what you should name things. But it's also hard, because we're not. This is a different world, and so we're not limited by language. So yeah, it's difficult. Lost City Books.
Pillage my village. And so I would lean towards, first and foremost, what sounds like retro-inspired dark fantasy. And my mind first goes to old school D&D, you know, stuff like this. Um, you know, Camelot, Avalon. One that I remember in the old D&D games is like Orlane and Greyhawk. These type of areas, even though they're not like they're basically just English names, they still have an element to them of character and flavor. But there can be some that are more like Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings, or the ring wraiths. Like the Sanctiarchs has an element of Latin to them, the name for these knights, but they are inherently there are the five Sanctiarchs, and then there are the knights of the orders of Sanctiarch, or the knights of the Sanctiarch, which are you could just refer to as the knights of the realm, because everybody knows if it's a knight, then it's probably a knight of the Sanctiarch and not some other order. Although there may be other orders that you guys come up with, which is totally fine. So yeah, it's really difficult to pin down like how to keep people from going crazy. I don't know. Does this even answer any of the questions? Mix of Old English and Modern English to kind of give the vibe of Valanhold. Like Salakport? I don't know how to pronounce that one. Burl Deep. Yeah. The Maw and the Bay. Yeah. That's super super good. If it sounds like it fits in, if you could see it on one of these posters in a retro fantasy, because that's really what we're going for. Is this, and retro fantasy spans wide as well. This is a broad genre. Anything from cartoons to books to much more gritty and realistic like oil brush or airbrush paintings and oil paintings and stuff like that, all the way to pen and ink sketches and some much more modern stuff. I watched a lot of videos from this guy on YouTube called Gavin the Medievalist. He's really great. He's graduated in history, and he has a doctorate in history, and he focused on medievalism and the studies and whatnot. And he talks about how there's a difference between the Middle Ages and medievalism as we perceive it. There are things like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, and Robin Hood that all affect how we think about the Middle Ages, even if those things didn't actually happen, even if the knights, errant and all of that, even if they weren't the way that fantasy and modern media portrays them, they affect what we think about them. And so even if something like Vermis is a great example, I always, love Vermis. It's very gritty, very dark, whatever. This is not actually retro. This is not an actual video game, but it looks like it was a real video game that existed, even if it wasn't. And so if you're seeing some names and you're thinking of things and you're like, man, this feels like it could be retro dark fantasy, it feels like it could be something that would look like this, even if it's not, or if it's not inspired by that directly, if it feels like it could be, then it probably can be. I don't know if that's probably a long-winded way to say that. But yeah, the naming scheme is a hard one because I know a lot of people care a lot about language and names. I find it fascinating, but I don't know if it's logistically possible to make that an emphasis of this project, at least at this stage. Maybe in later stages we can figure something out. But I'm not as skilled of a writer or a linguist as someone like Brandon Sanderson or George R. R. Martin, J.R.R. Tolkien. Is it George R. R. Martin? Is that his name? I think so. So I have a hard time trying to be like, this is the rule, this is the naming scheme. I think as of right now, just go with what feels best. And some people might have a different idea of, well, I think that names like I don't know. We have, for example, I think the names like Callahan de Levy sounds more like dark fantasy. And I think that names like, the Burl Deep and, Valanholds are more dark fantasy. I don't think we'll ever arrive at like a perfect, this is a SpireHelm name and this is not a SpireHelm name. So I think our best bet is just go with your gut and what feels the most best. What feels the best for your project.
I know it's not like a great answer, but that's just like me thinking out loud and trying to figure things out. I don't see a good way to completely eliminate differences without people feeling really restricted, or without me doing everything and basically not including you guys at all, or giving the job to one of you guys and nobody else gets to be included. If I find, if we find someone that's a linguist and they say, I'll do all the naming for all the entire realm, that kind of leaves the naming and the fun out of it for everybody else. So go with your gut. Okay, that's a good amount. Any other questions for that? If you have other questions, let me know. Let's kind of move on to the last few, because I think we're about wrapped up. What are submissions for? This one popped up, I think, a little bit in the Discord. I don't remember from who. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm just kind of like dead silent. So for anyone who has questions about what these are for, these are primarily for the compendium. We are building a book of sorts. I don't know if it'll actually go to print. I don't have any plans to put it to print unless things drastically change with how big this project is, and if I make no money off of this right now. If I made money off of it in the future, I would reinvest it into the project to make it cooler, do whatever we need to, and printing would be an awesome way to do that. But as of right now, there's no intention to print. It's just going to be a PDF that will feel like a real book that you can have for free, that gets you into the world of SpireHelm. This is a community project, and I want people to feel like they are a part of it from the get-go. And the best way to do that, I think, is to tell them what is SpireHelm, what is it not. And I think if they open a book and they go, oh my gosh, this is what I've been wanting. This is such a unique vibe. This feels like everything I love from X, Y, and Z with its own twist. That's what the compendium is supposed to be. So it's the most important information. They can see, like, okay, if it's fantasy, where are the knights? And they flip through the book and they go, oh my gosh, that looks like a knight. And they open that page and it's the Knights of the Sanctiarch, or the Orders of the Sanctiarch, or whatever. Or it's a collector and they go, I want adventures, I want dungeons. And they flip through and they see some stuff and it's like, that's exactly what I want. And so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to communicate what is SpireHelm through a distilled down, as concise as it possibly can be. And that is what the compendium is. So what these submissions are for, because I don't want to write the entire world by myself, because even the first part of it, because I think that takes away from what we started as. And I think our goal is to, I think I have it somewhere, probably in the master lore document, the quest. Here we are. Here is our quest. Inspire creativity. So unique enough for distinction, open-ended enough for creativity, carve out a distinct aesthetic, provide new content, and collaborate as a community. And so this one is the fourth, but still not necessarily less important than the others. But we want to inspire people to create their own content, because some of this came on just kind of inspired by the AI dark fantasy trends that were sprouting up, and a lot of the stuff looked cool, but it didn't have any depth to it. It had no design, no character. It just looked really cool, and you could maybe infer some stuff about where they got those images and the vibes and stuff like that. We want to make something for real, because making it is the fun part. Making and participating is the fun part. So, collaborate, provide new content, carve out a distinct aesthetic, inspire creativity. That's what the compendium will do. And so, as part of that, I don't want to necessarily be the only one doing this, otherwise it wouldn't be collaborative. Even though I think it would probably be, we'd probably end up at a better solution if only one person wrote the entire compendium, because writing is better when it's written by one person usually. But I think it's more fun if we all do it. So the Valanholds event is the first of these all events that we will do to basically create the compendium, which will be sections, a book of sections dedicated to different things in the world. So you guys have the power to create the character of these locations, these towns, and the best ones will go into the compendium and become canon. And they might have some minor changes if you know, we get further on and we go, oh, we need to go and retcon some stuff from here because we need it to connect here. We're going to do our best to make this as cool as possible without cutting out too much. I think we talked about this. Yep. Just to be confused originally because I thought maybe the submissions were for individual locations within each city, but now I'm thinking it's more macro than that. Yes, I would say this is a macro view of each of the Valanholds. This is not a micro view. At a future date, once again, there's a lot of ifs here. I'm not going to promise anything. My dream, the dream, is that the compendium does super well. Or doesn't even does super well. There's going to be no finances involved. But we have a great thing going, and by the time the compendium comes out, we have that as the poster boy for SpireHelm. We can then push it out to people because there's actual physical content, and we can say, look at this cool thing we made. You can be a part of this too. And then we can go, okay, what do people like the most? Do they like the Sancti Arcs? Do they like the Valanholds? Do they like the dungeons? The whatever? And we say, let's write an entire book on the Valanholds. And then it has an entire mega chapter per Valanhold. And you can go in, and then we can open it back up and say, okay, we all know what the Maw looks like. We all know what this place looks like. I want you guys to write, you know, you have your options. Do you want to write about the Thieves Guild? Do you want to write about trade? Do you want to write about the knights there? Do you want to write about just a short story? You know, I think story is the most important thing that people will eventually care about. Right now, we're just building the foundation. So don't necessarily worry about individual locations yet. I hope at some point we can really dive into individual locations, but I think a lot of those will come through stories and not through exposition in a book somewhere. But I could be wrong. Things could change. I think that's about that. Okay, location questions. This is one that I saw. Okay, if you guys have any questions about specifics of one of yours that you're like, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, type them in chat right now. Let me know. For example, this one they were saying, is the Citadel at the Maw the governing building, or is it something else? I'm trying to remember the exact question. I think I got tagged. Is the Citadel of the Maw meant to be the main governmental building of the Valanhold, or is it meant to be the upper class as a whole live, or both? Oh, that's for Char, so I don't think Char's in here, but probably both. We talked about not having like extensive nobles, but we also, the Maw makes the most sense to have like a class system a bit with trade and everything there. So the Citadel is the governing building, and the area most likely. Would the Maw be the place where more of the conflict is man versus man instead of man versus beast? I do have kind of both in my submission, but I feel like the place wouldn't be as safe as it seems. Okay. I also asked whether or not the term Citadel is only applicable to the Maw, or if that can be said of some other Valanholds. It could be any of them, and it doesn't have to be the Citadel. That was like the descriptive word that I used. If there's a different name for that castle, Citadel, whatever you want to call it, it could be whatever you want, and there could be one of those, and there likely is in all of them. There is probably the most secure, highest tower, whatever you want to call it, where the main governance takes place. Could they all be Citadels? Sure. Do they all have to be? Not necessarily. Even the Maw doesn't have to be a Citadel. That's just kind of like, once again, that's kind of the vibe I got, was like there's a sprawling city, and then on the hill there's a Citadel, and that's where the Valanhold itself is, even though the whole place is considered within the walls and whatnot. Going back to Alexandra, would the Maw be the place where the more of the conflict is man versus beast? I would think so. I feel like it would kind of have to be. I imagine the river has no man versus man conflict because they are the most at war with Beast and Vale. I imagine the Maw is probably the one where the most amount takes place, because when you think about it, sometimes like you think about like the most amount of fighting between people is when there's like peace, and they just want, they forget about like the fragility of life
And so you turn to fighting with each other in a way for menial things, for money, and maybe for some it's survival, if they're poor or, or whatever. But I think the Maw would be probably the most likely place for man versus man conflict. And I think, once again, we talk about the fantasies. What are the more important things in the world that we want to have? What are the experiences of a dark fantasy world? And I think thieves, bandits, bits of that are there, or should be present, even if they're not the main thing, even if it's more knights, and monsters, and whatnot. I think there is a place for that, and I do think the Maw is the most likely place, both within the city because it's a sprawling, like labyrinth of buildings, and I imagine they are over, some of them are over each other, and you have some openings, and like you get a bit of that city intrigue, even if it's not like other fantasies. And on top of that, you have the routes between places. And while a lot of people would probably say, I'll just go live in the Valanhold and be safe, protected by the knights and the realm, there are probably some people who say, I can fend better for myself. I'll just steal from the trade routes. And so you have the thieves on the ways in and the ways out. You might have thieves within the city that work for those groups outside. So I think there's definitely a place for that. And so that's probably I would agree, Alexandra. I think that's probably the most likely place for that. The fjord is very man versus world. Yeah. And the world is winning. Yep, pretty much. Yep, beasts, monsters, dragons, all sorts of things. And I can't wait to get to that point where we start designing the creatures, the monsters, the beasts. What does a SpireHelm dragon look like? Probably pretty traditional. What does a SpireHelm giant look like? Maybe something completely unique. And the monsters and the bales, the monsters, creations of the Dark One, I'm really excited for. So far, the only one we really have named is the Lurkers. I mean, that was kind of like way back when, when the project was looked very different and functioned very different. But I think it serves the purpose to show kind of what these bales, these monsters could look like outside of just the beasts of the world. I mean, we could throw this in here. Man v world. Beast. Okay, well, I mean, is that about all the questions you guys have? Anything else that we should talk about while we're here? Probably won't be on again. I might be on like next week or later this week or something. Yeah, the river and bay. Bay is probably man versus beast and monster. And the river is probably mostly man versus monster with some beast. Because I also imagine like the river, this is, once again, you guys get to be the ultimate decider, but I imagine the river is also, you almost have like 3 different groups, or I don't know if you would call it 3 different groups. You have at least 3 groups. You have the realm, so the ones that own the Valanhold that hasn't fallen yet, if ever. Then you've got the monsters from the Dark One, so the Bale, and they are constantly fighting. And then on top of that, you've got like your stereotypical goblins, hobgoblins, troglodytes, other beasts and creatures that are somewhat human, but are monsters, like they're beasts of themselves. And they are also vying for power, even if they are not fighting for the Dark One or for the realm, they're just there to fight, kind of thing. Like that's just what they do. They fight, they plunder, they steal, and that's how they survive, and that's how they make, and that's your typical goblin trope, is like that fantasy. And so I think the river might have more than one enemy at any given time, depending on what different factions, I mean, factions is a loose term, what forces would be, fighting them. And there just might be like giant monsters that just are mad that fighting is happening in their woods. And so there's just like, these massive bears or dragons that could come in and fight and just disrupt the entire battle that's already happening. So there are many more questions that people are in the Discord discussing. Yeah, we have the Discord, so if there's more questions there, I can try to answer them, but I figured it'd be good to kind of go over and I can blabber on for a bit and yap about different things like I always do. What will be the vibes of the pirates from the bay? I imagine some stolen ships with a couple raiders, strongholds, that something sometimes raid the villages. Yeah. I mean, like my fantasy, the fantasy I see in my brain is kind of that. It's as close as you can get to a pirate without it feeling like Pirates of the Caribbean. And so I picture, where's the bay at? Bay's up top. I picture, I don't even know. Yeah, like I think the stealing a ship and running away with it is an experience, a fantasy experience that it has a place in SpireHelm. I think it totally supports the fantasy. Um, yeah, less like Viking and more like pirates, but just without the cannons and the guns and the blunderbuss, but like sword fighting, you know, harpoons, monsters of the deep. We could have mermaids and like krakens and stuff like that are very fitting, even if those myths come from later, in world history. But I imagine, yeah, like you just wouldn't have like necessarily cannon fire between two ships. You'd have more, magic or, projectiles or whatever it is, that people would use, other methods. And yeah, you'd have like stolen ships, and I'd imagine there'd be islands. I mean, the map is really crude once again, but there's probably islands all up along the coast. And so you might have some people who bring in trade or use those islands as outposts for, what could functionally be called pirates. Somebody who owns their goal is to go and plunder from other people. So yeah, ship warlocks, stuff like that. I think that would be really cool to set SpireHelm apart from other fantasies. Is like, yeah, our pirates aren't swashbucklers; they're wizards, because they're the ones who can have long range projectiles that do extensive damage to wood because they light the whole ship on fire and or crumple things together and break bits off and whatever. And you could also end up with some really cool fantasy ships that are slightly outside of believability with magic enhancements. And you could have somebody with a dolphin, mermaid, hippocampus chariot or whatever it is. Like all these type of fantasies I think would be really cool to explore. And we may not get to explore that quite yet with just the Valanholds submission. It may be too small to really dive into the factions of the Bay and the different means of pirating and plundering and whatnot. All I know is it shouldn't be Pirates of the Caribbean, but I think you could have a lot of fun with that within dark fantasy, within traditional fantasy even. It's a side-by-side ship fight where instead of cannons they have to hurl loose rocks and rotting wood furniture at one another. Yeah, or like harpoons or spells or I don't even know, something else. Not sure if this has been asked, but someone in the Discord suggested a submissions channel. Is that something you'd want, or would you rather submissions only released after the event ends? I kind of want to keep them secret. I think it'd be more fun if nobody has seen what other people are working on, and we all get to, because I haven't looked at them either. I think it'd be cool if we all get to see them all at the same time. So I think proofread request is kind of like the one that, like, if you want to send it out there and have people, I'd read it and give you feedback and stuff. That's not against the rules by any means. You're more than welcome to have people read through your stuff if you don't care. But yeah, I think otherwise, I think we'll keep them secret-ish. And then I think once they're done, I can probably open up all of them. I mean, maybe I should have included that in the submission. I mean, I think it's implied that your stuff could be open to be shared with other people, at least as I don't know how it will work if you send a copy or if I don't know exactly. At some point, at least obviously the ones that win everyone will be able to see, even if they get changed eventually slightly. But maybe the ones that don't win would also be available for you guys to read through and look at and do stuff with. So yeah, a stream looking through some. Yeah, we'll probably stream the Monday, definitely stream the Monday or Tuesday after the submissions close, for example, on the 26th. And then we'll go, we'll read through all of them together. I'll give my thoughts, talk about it a lot, and figure out which ones are, likely going to win. If we don't decide there, we'll decide in the next few days. But yeah, I think it'd be really cool. Starting to get so much revelation into the bay with this revelation, or so much more into the bay with a revelation. Yeah, yeah. I hope we can have fun. That's the thing. We're here to have fun. The creation should be the fun part. We shouldn't only be too worried about the outcome. Creating can be fun, but also this is a collaborative work, and so you want other people to care about your stuff. And I think the best way to do that is to all be working on the same kind of things so that people have a reason to care about what you're making. But yeah, I'm excited to see what we come up with. And I think that's, I mean, I'm a very visual person. It's really hard for me to, not impossible. Maybe it's not really hard, but it's really easy to think of things when I have visual, inspiration. And so that's why, this Pinterest has been great. I've just been saving things left and right. I want to kind of come up with some monster designs. I've been thinking of some. And a lot of these are saved for different reasons. I love the visual, like graphic design language of this, even if I don't love the style. This isn't really a SpireHelm thing, but anyways, I came here to say, like this, for example, super cool. Like imagine if you were tasked with, a creative writing project for an English class or something, of like write pirates, but without using any swashbuckling, without using any, what do you call that? Renaissance age regalia, without using any guns. If you're limited to, like, I remember doing some drawing practices where it was like for a perspective drawing class, we had to like draw a building at the school, and then you had to turn it into something else. So you went and draw like the frame of the building, and then you had to turn it into a different world, either it was fantasy or sci-fi or something. I think I did like a cyberpunk, like garage bar type of thing. And so I took I reskinned it basically. And so we're not going to essentially be reskinning, but imagine if you had to write, once again, like we talked about pirates, imagine if you had to write pirates, but it had to look like this. Like, what would you do? How would you solve those problems? How would you come up with a creative solution to ship trade and ship combat without guns, but with magic and with swords and with scrolls and, monsters and all these different things? And I think that could be the same with a fjord. How would you write Vikings if there were no Vikings, but there were, goblins, skeleton warriors, wizards, dragons, armor, etc.? And so you should be keeping in mind, like, how could I make X feel like retro-inspired dark fantasy? And if you can do that, then you're on the right track. I think we can do some really cool stuff. It just sometimes takes a little bit of thinking and got to get inspired and everything like that. But yeah, I don't know. That's about it for me. Of course, the stream starts right as I start my run. There was not going to be an official submissions channel. I think the unofficial one will be the proofread request. But I think for the people who don't want it to be, I think for the events, it's going to be like secret. I don't even know if secret's the right word. Confidential, whatever. We'll all be part of it opening up together. So I think we'll all read through them all together on stream. And once that happens, then everybody can read through all of them. I won't like keep you guys from reading them. But I think it'll be fun if we all look forward to that event as like a fun time to read through everything. So I think for now, if you want people to read through your stuff, post it in the proofread request. Otherwise, we won't make a separate submissions channel yet. At least not for this one. We'll see how it goes. Maybe surprised after it closes. Oh yeah, what's the difference between flavor text and main description? Where did I say flavor text? So think of the main description as, if you were to say New York, for an example. I don't know much about New York, so this is probably a really bad example. If I was to give you a description of New York, I would say it's the biggest city in the US. It started off, I don't even know how I would say it. I don't even know. I'd say, I would talk about the main things. It's an island, it's skyscrapers, it's bridges, people commute in, it's bustling, it's the center of trade,
for, you know, the market, the stock market, people, it's a super diverse culture with little enclaves here and there of different backgrounds and ethnic groups. You can find anything in New York, whether it's music, food, entertainment, alcohol, whatever it is, it's all there in New York. You know, like there's you could mention Central Park, you could mention Brooklyn, you could mention Broadway, what is it, 7th, 5th Avenue, whichever one's the big one, Times Square. Like those are the things you would mention in a main description. But the flavor text would be something different. It would be like the Frank Sinatra, New York, New York. This is like the flavor text. I want to wake up in the city that doesn't sleep and find your king of the hill, top of the heap, small town blues, whatever, whatever. It's up to you, New York, New York. Like that's like a flavor text, if that makes sense. So this is a song example. We talked about poems, songs. The best example is probably this. This is a flavor text. Yon the bulwarks, the great city, omens and fell magic stain wood and hill, death given of beast, white and bale, indiscriminate, yet folk find safety in the few, the stalwart the last. So this doesn't really tell you like what a Valanhold is. It kind of does. The Valanholds are gallant, resolute. They stand between the woodlands and the faithful. 5 of them exist. Now mighty or so, toward the evils ever grown. Like, it doesn't really tell you. I mean, right here, the crown, strongholds, castles, the kingdom, and final defense of the realm. That's the only really, whoops, that's the only description it gives you. Oh, I'm not in description. Of what they actually are. But it doesn't tell you. The Valanholds are the strongholds of the Sanctiarchs, were originally that way, and now as the land grows darker, people flock to them, and they are the refuge for the people of the realm. They are the only big cities in the realm other than the capital. Like, that's not what the flavor text does. The flavor text gives you flavor. Like, it adds the character. This is something that somebody in the world might say. Probably would be. This says it's collected from an unnamed bard in a tavern on the lake south of the great city. So this guy is singing to people about the bulwarks beyond, or the Valanholds beyond the bulwarks of the great city. So this is like something he sings in bars or taverns in the city to tell people of the places outside that they've never experienced, they've never seen. They just hear these legends. And so that's what the flavor text should serve. It doesn't necessarily need to be a poem. It doesn't necessarily have to be a song. Just something that's short. Like, this is about as long as I'd want them to be. If it's longer, it's fine. But it could be way shorter. It could be this. On the bulwarks of the great city, omens and fell magic stain wood and hill, death given of beast, white and bale, indiscriminate, yet folk find safety in the few, the stalwart and the last, the crown, strongholds, castles, the kingdoms, and the final defense of the realm, the Valanholds. That could be the entire poem, and it'd stand just as strong. You don't really need the last part. So don't worry about making it too long. Don't go too crazy, but have fun with it. And if it's not clear, it doesn't have to be. You can make it as vague, as esoteric, as mysterious as you want, and it can still be cool. So it's just not a direct description, not an objective description. It's something that goes, oh, I know what this feels like. So this is what a Valanhold feels like to the people. The people find the safety in the few. They're gallant, resolute. They stand between us and the woodlands, and we mourn that only 4 of them remain, and that one of them fell. Though fallen the one, valiant the 4. That tells you how people feel about them more than what they are. So that's all. Been positively serenaded. Let's see. Whoops. Just crushed my keyboard. Okay. We're going to be doing a Valanhold submission reading stream. Yes. Where do we stand on the submissions if we want them to be read? Oh, where do you send the submissions? If you want them to be read on the stream, this here. If you make something for the Valanholds, I'd say submit it. If I wouldn't make something and not submit it. I think you definitely should. This is where the collaboration will take place. So far, we have 2 submissions. We've got 12 days left, so no rush. I imagine once it gets closer, we'll have a few more. Hopefully, more than 1 per Valanhold would be awesome. I'd love to have, options, but if we only get 1 for this first event, I won't be super butthurt. If we get less than 1
if somebody doesn't write about one of them, that would be kind of sad, because then we'd have to come up with it ourselves, or I would have to do it, or we have to do another event. So we'll see. But yeah, there's a Google form. You'll fill it out. You can, give your feedback. Yeah, just let me know which one you did and stuff like that. So nothing too crazy. And then there's a spot to submit your PDF or Google Doc or whatever it is. Okay, should have a poll. Okay, we should have a poll for what topic is written about next. That could be a fun way to engage the community. Totally agree. Part of it's like, what things do I think are the most important? And some of it's not even like what would be the most fun to write about next, because I think the most fun to write about next is kind of like all the stuff that comes after the whole compendium is done. I don't think we'll necessarily go by what is the most fun, more probably based on what is the most needed, but I'll limit it down to like 2 or 3 and let you guys decide, because I think that's super fun. Right now I'm leaning towards either the governance of these Valanholds or the Sanctiarchs, like the original 5 Sanctiarchs. I think writing those characters for people who, this has been more environment design and a little bit of like world building. The Sanctiarchs will be much more character design, story driven. Like you can write their history or a little bit, or tales of these legendary heroic demigod figures of the realm. And I think that'll be really fun for people who are more character driven, story driven, which is essential. This project will not work if we only focus on one or the other. We need a good mix of both. But having our first real characters written other than Aletheus is going to be super fun. I'm looking forward to that. So I hope we get to the Lords and the Sanctiarchs and stuff like that soon. Okay. Does the sea shanty work for the Maw, or count for the poem flavor text? Yeah, totally. Or the bay. Yeah, either one. The Maw isn't really sea shanty vibes. It could be both. I mean, it's a lake. It's a big, huge lake. So pub song could be either. And I imagine a lot of people, it's a small realm. It's not like people who, I mean, some people would never travel the realm, but other people would travel the realm all the time. The people who trade and do the trade up the river and go from the bay to the Maw probably would bring their sea shanties up to the Maw, and then that would get cycled around through the people there, and then it'd spread through places. So amazing singing voice, thank you. What's the call on naming these towns and all? I know we can come up with our own, but they have to be a specific type of naming method. We talked about that a little bit. No, there is no official naming method. Go with your gut. English is a Latin and Germanic language. I've pulled a lot from some different sources. If you think it would fit, like we talked a little bit about some of these like retro fantasy, Karnaki. I've just been kind of looking at names of like old posters and books. Some of them are in different languages, not super helpful. But like Camelot, Avalon, Minas Tirith, these places that sound like they could fit in one of these retro dark fantasy posters. Retro fantasy, original, like Robin Hood. Where's Robin Hood? Nottingham. These places could be inspired directly by, I know, like Nottingham, Birmingham. These are all places in like the UK that came up through the original Britons. But if it feels right, go with it. There's not going to be a huge naming scheme, and I don't imagine we will ever have enough time to dive into linguistics and nomenclature in this project. I don't, as much as I would love for it to be really cool and really pronounced, I think going with what feels the best and what reinforces the character of your location the best is probably going to be more fun for people. And maybe someday we'll go back and revise some things, or maybe we'll make an entire kingdom of very poignant naming schemes, and we'll have a realm like that. But for now, it's just going to be too hard to do stuff. But I did change the wording here. No, not that one. Name. So I deleted the whole thing here. So your doc should be titled, if this is me, it would say the Valanhold and the Maw, for example, or the Valanhold, the river. I just need to know which one I'm looking at when I'm scrolling through on the, once you guys have submitted them all, I want to be able to glance and say, okay, this one's the river, this one's the fjord, whatever. However, your name can be whatever you want. The names I've given them are just placeholders. If you want to name it something like Minas Tirith and have no reference to the river, the maw, the bay, the fjord, you could name it like that. So do whatever you think is best. There's no real rules. Just try to keep it sounding like fantasy. Don't try to invent your own language. And we're probably on the right track. Okay. Loch Draco. It means pretty much the same thing, but I think it sounds cooler. Perfect. Yeah. Latin, Celtic, Germanic, those are all great. Oh, I was going to pull this up. Two things that I've been using a lot. Beowulf is a really old Anglo-Saxon epic poem. It's not perfect for this, but there are some parts of it that have been helpful for some things. Let's see here. For words, for naming things. Not so much for place names, although you could. Wackerbarth sounds like it could be. Thorkelin. So like pulling out of real things from history is very, very helpful. Even if you don't use the entire thing or word for word, if you're pulling roots of words or different things, we'll be able to tell what it is. So this section here, glossary of proper names. This one's their names. So Hunferth, Higd, Ingeld, all these different things like Olslaf. These are names that they're slightly more Old English than Anglo-Saxon than probably what SpireHelm is. But once again, if they fit, if you think Ravenswood, I mean that sounds like a completely reasonable name. Nagling, Merewing, those are some names that you could totally. Oh, I can't hide it. So that section's good. This section is really cool too. So like, once again, these are a little more Old English than I think I've used mostly, but I have pulled from some of these. For example, wight. A wight is a creature, but a wight can also mean like a ghost in some other things. Like I use a lot of this type of language for the poem at the beginning of the Valanholds. So like I used like wood and hill, death given a beast, wight and bale. I use wight right there. So it's like any type of creature, indiscriminate. Gallant, resolute, just the kind of the feel of the writing can be helpful. And then there's stuff like here, like helm, heft, could be a handle. So if you want to make it sound more like you're not saying he grabbed the handle, you could just say he grabbed the heft or whatever it is. He ferried long throughout the day, or brand or burn. Carl, Earl, Bill, whatever it is. So I've used this one. I found it's been kind of helpful, but it's a little too old, I think, in a lot of ways to be really helpful. Below the Spear Danes, glory through splendid achievements, the folk king's former fame we have heard of. Like that's this is an epic poem, so it has that like rhythm and cadence to it. And I think for me, it might not be the same for you guys. For me, writing this was super fun, and it helped me doubled and tripled down on what I felt about the Valanholds, how they felt, how the people viewed them. So I think kind of getting into this poetic mood can be helpful. And it has these little things up here. So if you look up Beowulf, it's open source. You can find a lot of different PDFs of Beowulf. But that one can be good. The other one is Robin Hood and the Monk. This is a Robin Hood and the Other Outlaw Tales. So this is written in Old English, I think. Like, evermore well him be. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Take 12 of thy white yeomen, strong yeomen. Like, well weaponed by thy side. Like, it has a very, I don't know. This shouldn't, like, you don't need to write like this entirely. I wouldn't, probably. But it can be very helpful to be like, oh, smote him his handle. You can use these like him if you want to. You don't have to write in formal English. You can invent words if you want. This is going down a little bit more of a tangent. Let me find Mythic Bastionland page. I love this. I hope this isn't like copyrighted. I don't think I'll get flagged for this. This is like one of the pages from Mythic Bastionlands. Love it. It's beautiful. The art, the vibes, everything. So, a pact to uphold truth and fact
On lies the false, lay break and cracked. Birth in air, spread by stream, lurking in the blood. The terror of our time will see us all stuck in the mud. So that one has like all real words, but I remember watching a video from the guy who wrote this, Chris McDowell, and he talked about how when he couldn't think of the right word, he would just invent one that sounded right. Like you don't really need to use official historical language. If you want to use something, Roth, waxed, him, Nottingham, like himself, if you want to say that, go for it. Especially in the poems and the in-world stuff. Maybe in the description you could be a little bit more clear, but like have fun with this. I want you guys to have as much fun as possible. So if the Tales of Robin Hood, if Beowulf, if other Old English historical, medievalisms, you can find old versions of them or not. Even the translated stuff is great, even in whatever, Little John, like that. That's super fun. Anyways, so I hope you guys can take some inspiration from those if you need to. I can send links to those in the Discord as well for like writing helps or something. Anyways, I hope that helps you guys a little bit with that. Doesn't really seem they'll be homogenized. Yeah, okay. I think you guys have kind of answered some of the questions. Let me just scroll down and catch up. Working on the MAW as we speak. Okay. Working on every part of my collab done. Perfect. Cool. I think that's about it. There's one for the Bay and proofread request. I'm working on the one for the Bay as well. Sweet. So yeah, for naming, for poems and stuff, a lot of mine has been inspired by both Chris McDowell's stuff, a lot of it, like the poems especially, in Mythic Bastionlands. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. If you have the time or a way to, I think he has a free PDF of like that you can download. That's kind of the, oh, this is the same one. Where's the other one? Let's see if this one's any better. I think he has a free PDF that you can download as like a get started. You don't have to buy the whole thing, but very interesting imagery. This is, once again, this is the closest thing I think to SpireHelm that I've found for a tabletop role-playing game. It has seers, which are basically, they're oracles. So the Ignispecs would serve very similarly, although kind of different. The knights in this realm are knighted by the seers, whereas the Ignispecs and SpireHelm are kind of their own thing, and they're flame oracles essentially, more than just seers. But the knights, the quests, the omens, the tales, the myth, and like a changing realm that's not really objective in a lot of ways, is the fantasy is there in a lot of ways. Although this is much more knights errant and Knights of the Round Table-esque more than it is heroic dark fantasy. But I think it's it's the closest thing for a knight in the realm, although it doesn't really capture the collectors of the archive fantasy. But once again, this is just what I'm saying. It's just as close as it can get. Revealer of all secrets in stark, judgmental light, in cold and sharpened hearts lies no deceitful spite. Flames of greed in earth enriched, in deepest soil no thirst bequenched. Like, I don't even know if bequenched is a word. Yep, bequenched is not a word. So he made that up. Bequenched. Do that, guys. That's cool. That's fun. And it didn't take me any time looking up any details or anything. I could feel what it meant without having to know where the word came from. So that's all I really got for you guys, for inspirations and stuff, for words, for names. I think that's answered most of our questions that you guys had in the Discord. Yeah, Mouse made some playlists and stuff. I actually have a song from the guy that does the music for my YouTube videos and stuff that he made for one of I think the MAW. He was writing some, kind of trying to get a feel for like what the world would sound like. He's a music composer, and so he really wants to use this as like a creative, inspirational standpoint and stuff. So he sent me a demo for a song that would, like, not an anthem necessarily, but like some music inspired by the MAW so far, from what I've told him about and what he's seen from you guys. So I've been kind of trying to I have this synth over here
I really need to I really need to get better at it. It can make some really cool sounds that I think fit perfectly for SpireHelm, and I intend to use this for some of the stuff. I don't know, maybe I'll do like maybe I'll stream on Twitch or something, so it's not confusing on YouTube, but we'll just do like a synth stream and just noodle around for a while and see what we can come up with. But I really want to get this going. Music is also a very hard thing to communicate. I don't know how you tell someone what dark fantasy sounds like. It's just, it's hard. So communicating with Vincerus, you know, in the Discord, he's the one that's been doing the music for me previously and stuff. It's been really fun. I haven't needed as much music recently, but you know, like the default is that Dorian concept, the Hyde song we've all heard a million times, the ARPs and the dark fantasy trend and stuff like that, and some of the Golden Brown and some of the other songs. But I also want SpireHelm to have its unique, you know, audible aesthetic, you know, its own music and that feels like SpireHelm. So yeah, do metal synth, Golden Brown, yeah. Dungeon synth is a really inspired like one, but there's not a lot. I've looked around, like Vince was asking me like, hey, what's like if you had to give me like one video game album, one music album, and one YouTube video or something that you would say is like the most like SpireHelm. I listened for like 2 or 3 days straight trying to find music that I was like, this is really what SpireHelm is. I couldn't find anything that it was like, to me, it was like, this is exactly it. This is it. Other than like Dorian Concept Hyde and like some of the dungeons and stuff. And so it's really difficult to communicate like how to make it feel both medieval and fantastical and orchestral, but at the same time retro with like synth and, you know, modern technology. Like it's kind of a blend of like medieval and vintage retro technology. I don't know how you even communicate that in music, but I think we'll get there. It'll be difficult, but I look forward to, I think when we have the Valanholds stream and stuff like that, I think he's going to take some of those, whatever ideas we make, and flesh those out into like either like a D&D type of ambient soundtrack, like this is what the Maw would sound like if you were there with some music over top, or this is what the Bay would sound like, or he might also just write kind of theme songs for those locations that feel kind of like, you know, those areas, you know, inspire you guys. That's really all it's about, is like, if you're going to be writing something in the Maw, you have some soundtrack to listen to that's like, this is what the Maw is from the official SpireHelm point of view. So, Bye Bye Earth OST by Kevin Pankin. I will put that on my to watch. Let's see. Bye Bye Earth. Kevin Pankin. Yeah, I will listen to that. I'm really enjoying the doom metal band Electric Wizard. Okay, let's see. Cool. I'll check them out too. I think I've probably heard some of their stuff. Like I've listened to a lot, trying to figure out like which direction to take SpireHelm. It's just hard. There's a lot of music out there, and I want SpireHelm to be unique, but not, you know, so foreign that it feels alien. So, anyways, I'm looking forward to this, guys. Keep it up. Keep up having fun. If you guys aren't having fun, then I'm sorry. Hopefully the next one will be more fun. Or just let me know why it's not fun. If you're not doing in the submissions, when you actually make your submission, there's like a feedback section, so you can write as much as you want there and let me know what did work, what didn't work, what you would change going forward. But if you're like, I'm not even going to participate in this one's so dumb, let me know. Put it in I don't know, server suggestions or something in the Discord server. Let me know what you hate about it. Yeah, because this is an attempt. Like I said, it's not going to be perfect the first time we try. We're doing our best. We will try this out and see what happens. If we need more people for this to work, we can fix that problem. If there's no amount of people that will fix this, or no amount of change that can fix this, then I don't really know where we go. But as of right now, I'm pretty confident. I think we can figure it out. So, okay. Reposted an animated Gandalf edit to Electric Wizard? Probably. Yeah. I probably did. Yeah, I've been reposting some stuff of like, yeah, this is the vibe. You know, sometimes there's like just other things that are completely unrelated that just kind of give you inspiration for certain things. I think that's fun. So I've been reposting some stuff like that on TikTok. Allowed to reuse other people's images in our own submissions. Oh yeah, that one. I forgot about that question. Finding images that represent your whole world takes a good deal of time. We already have a few images ready. Just wondering. Yeah, you can totally take them. I think. Um, I mean, if they're not explicitly drawn by somebody in the Discord, then they're probably free to use. Like the mood boards. If you're gonna put it in like the mood board, um, once again, this isn't going anywhere. We don't need to officially credit people. If you want to add credit for who did the art because you think people will like, for example, for me, Frank Frazetta is a big one. You've seen a bunch of his art on stream today. I think this might be him or Horley Abram, um, inspired by Frank Frazetta. But this is Frazetta here. He has like these oil paintings. I think oil, acrylic, gouache, some combination of the three, from the 1970s and 80s and whatnot. So like, if you're putting this together and you know who the artist is, why not include it? You could just put a little note underneath and tell you who the artist is, but it doesn't have to be. So yeah, if somebody's using art and you like it and you think it's pretty helpful for yours as well, perfect. If somebody drew some art and threw it in the Discord, I would ask them for permission first and credit them. But otherwise, I think, yeah, you're pretty much fine to use anything on here that I've given, anything anywhere you find. It's mostly just a mood board, especially for me, who my vision is to get back to drawing as soon as possible. You know, I want to make this, I want to bring this world that you guys have created to life visually. And so if you have a mood board that I can pull from and say, this is what your vision was, I can now take that vision, combine those things in a unique way, and add some SpireHelm spice to it to make it good. So yes, finding the same images coincidentally, I know Pinterest is massive yet small at the same time. I feel like I have my own personal Pinterest and I run into like half of these same images at the same time. I'll look for completely different things and find the same image that I've seen 100 times and I'll be like, oh my gosh, there it is again. But that's just life. If it's someone else's art, not from the server, but like Pinterest, but I call dibs. I mean, I don't know if there is any dibs on Pinterest, but we'll, yeah, I think that's about it for that. Dibs is dibs. I mean, yeah, I guess so. It's a very interesting world map. It's a big ol' maelstrom in the middle. Can't wait to get our map done, but I am not stressing about it yet. Oh, there's just so many fantasy maps that just go way too crazy for me. I think it's fun to have a little bit of fantasy aspect to things of like big and small and stuff, but some of them get like crazy. Like this. I don't know, that actually looks pretty cool. That wall over to the top right is kind of crazy. Anyways, I'm getting off tangent now. Just having fun on Pinterest, looking through stuff for inspiration and whatnot. Okay, what if they looked at their art to mark their territory? Yeah, well, that makes it difficult when it's all digital. Cool. Well, I think that's it for me. I think we'll end stream there. Unless there's any other questions. I mean, obviously, I'll be in the Discord. Let me know if you have any questions and stuff. But yeah, that's really it for me. Cool. Well, I'll see you guys soon. I don't know when the next stream will be, but we should have one soon here. And yeah, see you guys soon. Ciao. See if this works. I don't know if it'll cut or not. We'll see.